Chapter 651. With a small virescent sword in hand, Su Ming stabbed the blade into the grass. Once the blade sank into the grass, he closed his eyes slightly. As bell chimes reverberated in his body, Han Mountain Bell manifested around him and flew out. The picture of a 9-headed dragon carved on it looked as if it was alive, and its roars seemed to be echoing in the world. 9-headed dragon, Su Ming whispered softly. Nine. The instant Su Ming said those words, the small candle dragon immediately flew out from his collar. With one move, it crawled into the grass and disappeared. At the same time, Han Mountain Bell in the sky grew larger once again and spread down endlessly. It replaced the sky above Su Ming and even rushed into the rolling dark clouds to hide itself. This was the 6th gift Su Ming had prepared for the disaster. There's still the 7th. Su Ming's eyes sparkled, and he cast a glance at the crimson dragon on his arm. The crimson dragon had opened its eyes and was also looking at Su Ming. A resolute look appeared in its eyes. Without waiting for Su Ming to speak, the crimson dragon manifested on his arm and let out a roar towards the sky. Its gigantic body charged into the sky and disappeared into the clouds, disappearing from sight. However, it still existed. Su Ming could sense that with just one thought, the crimson dragon would erupt with its strongest power and destroy everything in the world. This was the 7th gift. Su Ming sucked in a deep breath. As he lifted his hands, the power of lightning erupted from the lightning crystal of inheritance in his body. That power surrounded Su Ming's body, and as he looked at the endless amount of lightning sparks swimming about, Su Ming opened his eyes and struck his chest with his right hand. With that one strike, as lightning crackled all over his body, Su Ming opened his mouth and spat out an item. That item was a black cauldron with 9 holes in it. This item had always been in Su Ming's body, and it was the manifestation of the lightning he had absorbed when he transcended in Han Mountain City. This item had not gone through many changes while it was in his body. It was only after he obtained the lightning berserker's inheritance that Su Ming sensed something different about it. It was as if this item was connected to the lightning berserker. In fact, even though the black fragment had played the biggest role in him obtaining the lightning berserker's inheritance, if he did not have this item, he would not have been able to guide him. The moment Su Ming spat out the 9 sockets cauldron, the origin vessel of transcendence, the lightning around him charged towards the cauldron and disappeared within the blink of an eye, causing one of the 9 sockets on the cauldron to be filled with lightning. Su Ming narrowed his eyes. With a swing of his arm, the cauldron rushed towards the clouds in the sky. At the instant it sank into the clouds, thunder roared, and an endless amount of lightning swam about from all directions in the sky before gathering on the cauldron. That was not the end. Su Ming formed a seal with his hands, and his nascent divinity covered his entire body. At that moment, he executed the 9 transformations of the 9 transformations, 10 transformations, 1 thunder. The first transformation, the second transformation, the third transformation. Each time Su Ming changed his mark, he would strike towards the sky. Each time he did so, the lightning in the sky would increase exponentially, causing the second socket of the 9 sockets cauldron to be filled up, and gradually, the third socket. When Su Ming reached the 7th transformation, his level of cultivation reached its limit, and 4 of the 9 sockets on the cauldron in the clouds in the sky were completely covered by lightning. This was the 8th gift Su Ming had prepared for the person who was about to face the great disaster. There's still one more. Su Ming looked at his left hand. Right before his eyes, his left palm gradually turned black, and soon, that darkness filled his entire palm. However, before long, that black color gradually disappeared. Only the lines on his left palm were still black, and compared to his normal skin color, it was an incredibly terrifying sight. The curse. When Su Ming whispered softly, his gaze fell on his right hand. There was a hint of black light shining there at that moment, but it soon disappeared, as if it had hidden itself within his right hand and could not be seen. The 9th gift. Dition, I truly hope that you are the one who will face the great disaster this time. I will wait for you here with the 9th gift. Su Ming closed his eyes and calmed his breathing as he waited quietly. He had already set up the trap, and Su Ming would definitely not leave this place. He wanted to know that if Di Tian was truly the one who would face the great disaster, then he would come. Su Ming waited for 3 days. During those 3 days, he did not move, but continued meditating with his eyes closed, allowing his condition to continuously increase until he reached his strongest state. Su Ming knew that the great disaster this time would be incredibly difficult, but he would not back down from it. There was no room for him to back down either. He could only fight. He had to fight. He had to kill his way to control his own fate, kill his way to overturn the world. Fight! Red threads gradually appeared in Su Ming's closed eyes. A monstrous fighting spirit and killing intent rose in his body, and like a storm, it swept through the area. He wanted to fight. He wanted to fight against Di Tian, fight against his fate, fight against his confusion, and fight against his life. When the 5th day arrived and Su Ming's fighting spirit reached its peak, ripples distorted in the sky in the distance, and a figure walked out of it. That person was dressed in an emperor's robe and had an emperor's crown on his head. His expression was aloof, and when he walked out, he cast a cold glance at Su Ming, who was on the island beneath him. He was Di Tian. After waiting for a few days, he noticed that Su Ming was no longer heading towards eastern wastelands. After some hesitation, he chose not to wait any longer and chose to come personally. To him, changing Destiny's path was not too difficult, even though there was a gap in his surveillance of Su Ming over the years. However, he believed that this gap was not enough to make his entire plan crumble. At the instant he saw Su Ming, Di Tian did not even say a single word. He took a step towards the island where Su Ming was, and his aloof face and emotionless expression revealed his domineering air at that moment. There was also an awe-inspiring air about him, and with the emperor's robe, it made Di Tian look like the supreme ruler of the world, as if all the land under the sky belonged to him, and as if there was no second life in the world to him. With that one step, the world roared, and the Dead Sea beneath him tumbled backwards, as if it could not withstand Di Tian's arrival. At that moment, Di Tian's presence was the same as the clone Su Ming had seen fighting against Hong Luo in the past. It's not my real self. At the instant Di Tian's foot landed and the world roared, Su Ming opened his eyes. With a single move, he flew up, and the Undertaker of Evil's armor manifested on his body. When it covered his entire body, the Undertaker of Evil's spear appeared in Su Ming's hand. All of this happened in the blink of an eye. In the blink of an eye, Su Ming had already put on the Undertaker of Evil's armor. Di Tian completely ignored the armor's appearance. Once he took that step, he lifted his right hand and swung it through the air. A wave of fog that surged into the sky tumbled towards Su Ming as if it wanted to cover the entire world. Su Ming let out a cold harumph. At the instant he rose into the air, he took a step forward. When his foot landed, the air rumbled. This was not a normal step. It was Su Ming's god of berserkers' 7 steps. The first step. When his foot landed, a gigantic footprint appeared in the thin layer of clouds above Di Tian, and with a piercing whistle, it charged towards him. Once Su Ming's foot landed, he took another step forward. He did not stop and took 6 steps straight away. With them, 6 footprints that were each larger than the last replaced everything above Di Tian. As they descended with loud, booming sounds, they crashed into the vast amount of fog that Di Tian had stirred up with a swing of his arm. At the instant the booming sounds that shook the sky and earth reverberated in the air, Su Ming took his 7th step. When it appeared, the largest footprint swiftly descended, causing the booming sounds, which were already shocking to begin with, to become several times louder once again. At the same time, when Su Ming finished casting the god of berserkers 7 steps in sky stomping, his speed reached an unimaginable level. Piercing whistles were still reverberating in the air, and the air was still being torn apart. Su Ming had already seized the Undertaker of Evil's spear and shot through the endless space like a long arc. He appeared before Di Tian, and with one thrust, he charged towards the center of Di Tian's brows. This was Su Ming. He took the initiative to attack, instead of resisting like he did in the past. This spear symbolized his resistance towards fate. This spear symbolized the resolve in his heart. This spear contained his hatred towards Di Tian. The meaning behind this change from being forced to retaliate to taking the initiative to attack was so great that it was as if the sky and earth had turned upside down. A loud bang that drowned out all the other sounds spread out swiftly. Di Tian's eyes remained as calm as ever, and his expression was calm. There was not a hint of any change in his expression. In fact, he did not even take half a step back. He only lifted his right hand and tapped the tip of Su Ming's spear with his finger. In the midst of that rumble, Su Ming coughed up a mouthful of blood and staggered backwards. He turned into an arc and fell towards the island. He failed with this attack. Di Tian's clone was so strong that he could injure Su Ming with just one finger, but it was not without a price. A fine wound had appeared on the pad of Di Tian's finger. Looks like you've improved quite a lot over the years since you managed to injure this clone of mine, but you still have to walk down the path that belongs to you so that you won't disappoint your seniors. As Di Tian spoke, he closed in on the island where Su Ming was tumbling backwards. Yet right at the instant he closed in and Su Ming landed on the ground, a strange smile appeared at the corners of his lips. One of the reasons why he had taken the initiative to attack was because of his determination and his desire to change. The other reason was that he wanted to test just how much damage his body could withstand. There was also another reason, which was to lure Di Tian into the area around the island. At that moment, Di Tian walked towards him. Di Tian, Su Ming let out a low growl. He lifted his right hand and swiftly pressed his palm on the seemingly ordinary stone monument. It was the stone monument that contained the legacy left behind by the first god of berserkers, but had only been passed down to the third god of berserkers. The instant Su Ming's palm landed, the stone monument let out a buzzing sound, and the presence that belonged to the first god of berserkers appeared in the world at that instant, causing Di Tian's expression to change drastically for the first time ever as he walked over. This is Lai Shan Xiu's presence. This is the third update, and there's still the fourth update. I'm going all out. Did you see that? Did you vote? To be continued. If you like this work, please come Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 652. Lai Shan Xiu's presence should not have possessed such great might, because it was not very strong, but rather faint. After all, it had already been passed down through 3 generations, and there was only a small amount of it left. However, if the intimidating power of this item was targeted at the immortals who had trembled under Lai Shan Xiu's might in the past, then the effect of this presence would reach an incredibly terrifying degree. This was not a suppression in terms of cultivation base. Neither was it a physical injury. It was a form of shock to the soul, a form of pressure that came from the soul. The more he trembled when he was intimidated by Lai Shan Xiu in the past, the more severe this mighty pressure became. He was like a bird that was startled by the mere twang of a bough. That bird was once wounded by an arrow, and when it heard the twang of a bough, it would fall to the ground. Right now, Di Tian was exactly like that. Before he became famous, he had watched the first god of berserkers sweep through the land of immortals. That great power, that terrifying bloodthirst, was a nightmare that had haunted him for a long time. At the instant he sensed Lai Shan Xiu's presence, a rarely seen tremor appeared in Di Tian's heart. That tremor caused a moment of absent-mindedness to appear on his face. To Su Ming, that moment of absent-mindedness was a chance that could only be chanced upon but not sought. It was also the reason why he had given Di Tian this gift. At the instant Di Tian became absent-minded, Su Ming pressed his palms against the ground. Immediately, the red meadow tumbled into the sky, and an area of more than several thousands of feet rose up from the sea. Red fog spread out from the red meadow, and the instant it filled the air, Su Ming grabbed the mast and stabbed it into the meadow. The moment the mast stabbed the meadow, the red fog that spread out immediately gathered together to turn into a gigantic shadow. With a roar, it charged towards Di Tian. At the same time, all the meadow flew up with a flick of Su Ming's right hand and surrounded Dition. Explode. Su Ming let out a low growl. The instant the meadow surrounded the dazed Dition, it let out a booming sound that surged into the sky and exploded at the same time, turning into a wave of impact that charged towards Dition. Almost at the instant the red meadow exploded, the shadow of the red fog wrapped itself around Dition's body, as if it was about to devour him. Struggle appeared on Dition's face, a telling sign that he was about to snap out of the shock of the first god of Berserker's sudden appearance. There was no way Su Ming would waste this chance that he had seized after much difficulty. He formed a seal with his hands on the island and quickly pointed forward. Great Yu's illusory realm. As he pointed his finger forward, his nascent divinity abruptly spread out and fused with the fragment of Great Yu's palace that still existed in the collapsed grassland. The fragment suddenly shone with a strong, dark light, and as it flickered, the dark light immediately enveloped Dition. At this moment, the signs of awakening on Dition's body were once again replaced by confusion. This confusion was due to him being immersed in Great Yu's illusion. It was something Su Ming had created with his own thoughts after he saw Great Yu Dynasty with his own eyes, and the degree of reality in it was incomparable. Right at the instant Dition became lost once again, Su Ming let out a low growl, and a ray of black light suddenly appeared in the air. That black light was the killing move Su Ming had prepared, the small black humanoid. That small humanoid's origins were strange, and its origins were unknown. Su Ming could not tell just how strong or weak it was, but as it appeared, the small humanoid shot into Dition's body. At the instant it did so, Su Ming seized the air in the direction of the ground with his right hand, and his body swiftly shot up from the ground. At the same time he flew up, a green sword charged towards him from the ground. Su Ming held it in his hand, and he was so quick that he closed in on Dition in the blink of an eye. The murderous aura from the sword in his hand surged into the sky. Sword aura was mixed within it, and as it swept outwards, Su Ming struck Dition's body, but at the instant the sword closed in on him, a freezing glare appeared in Dition's dazed eyes, and they became clear. There was not a hint of confusion in them. Great Yu's illusion. I personally participated in the destruction of Great Yu Dynasty in the past, and I even brought you away from there. This illusion is simply too weak. As Dition spoke calmly, he formed a seal with his right hand and pushed towards the incoming sword aura. I am the heavens. All manner of living are under the heavens, and all are under me. The heavens have given all manner of living different souls. If I am unwilling, then I will take those souls back and give birth to the souls seized by the heavens. When Dition said those calm and emotionless words tumbling out of his mouth, he tapped the sword aura with his right index finger. At the instant his finger touched the sword aura, Su Ming heard a shrill scream of pain coming from within the small virescent sword. His sword instantly became dull, as if the sword soul within was rapidly disappearing. That finger shot through the sword aura and charged towards Su Ming. During that moment of danger, Su Ming lifted the sword in his hand and bit his left index finger. At the same time he fought against Dition's finger, he swiped the tip of his left hand across the blade of the sword. At the same time he drew a line of blood. Dition tapped the sword with his finger. A clear sound reverberated in the air, and a large amount of cracks appeared on the sword. A strange power that seemed to be able to separate a person's soul from their body charged towards Su Ming. Without any hesitation, Su Ming swiped the blade of the sword with his left hand. With it, a piercing sword whistle reverberated in the air, and a wave of sound swept towards Dition with the sword as the center. The sword shattered inch by inch in Su Ming's hand, but those fragments swept towards Dition and crashed into the incoming finger. Loud booming sounds reverberated in the air, and Su Ming coughed up blood as he tumbled backwards. Dition's expression turned slightly dark. You have quite a lot of tricks up your sleeves, but do you still have any? Dition said coldly and took a step towards Su Ming, who was continuously retreating with a pale face. Yet the instant he took 2 steps forward, Su Ming came to an abrupt halt, and a dark light shone in his eyes. Tian frowned. A roar came from the clouds in the sky. It was a dragon's roar, the crimson dragon's roar. A crimson dragon of 10,000 feet revealed its head from the clouds and glared at Tian. It did not know Tian, but it could sense that this person's body was stained with the presence of the person who had killed its previous master. As it roared, the crimson dragon charged towards Tian. With a calm expression on his face, Tian lifted his right hand and swung it forward. The dragon's soul formed by Hong Luo's earthen aura divine ability. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust, there is no second life for a person, he said calmly. But the instant his words tumbled out of his mouth, his body suddenly shuddered, and disbelief appeared on his face. Tian's divine ability was not unleashed externally. Instead, the divine ability that he had just unleashed appeared within his body. It was as if he was self-mutilating. It was as if someone had unleashed the same technique in front of him and used it on his body. At that moment, Tian's body actually became a little blurry. The crimson dragon let out a low growl and seized the chance to close in on Tian. It opened its mouth wide, and as it roared, its body swept outwards. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. He knew why Tian had done this, because during that instant just now, he had sensed a hint of the small black humanoid's presence. He did not have time to think about how the small black humanoid had managed to do this, but he could not waste this chance. As he closed in, Su Ming lifted his right hand, and the instant the reincarnation finger closed in on Tian, he tapped the center of his brows. Yet right when his finger landed, a powerful rebound immediately crashed into his body. Blood trickled out of the corners of his mouth, and Su Ming tumbled backwards. It was the same for the crimson dragon. As it crashed into Tian and tumbled about, as well as the ripples from the earthen aura dragon vein, even if it did not manage to injure Tian, it would suffer a huge rebound. After a few times, its body shrank by a large margin, and it even looked slightly dispirited. Tian's expression was dark. He simply allowed Su Ming and the crimson dragon to attack him, completely ignoring them. He lifted his right hand and struck his chest. With it, a shrill scream of pain came from his body, and a small black humanoid was forced out of his back. It was in tatters, and it looked as if it was about to be completely forced out of his body. Nine-headed dragon. Su Ming let out a low roar, and immediately, an endless amount of bell chimes rang out from the clouds in the sky. Those bell chimes rumbled, and at the instant they appeared, the clouds in the sky tumbled about. A bell that was several thousands of feet big descended from the sky and enveloped Tian within it. At the same time, the illusion of a nine-headed dragon manifested in the sky. The awakened heads roared and spat out an endless amount of vengeful souls towards Han Mountain Bell. Those vengeful souls filled the sky and earth and surrounded Han Mountain Bell. They even shot through the bell and charged towards Tian. At that moment, Tian lifted his head and roared. Immediately, the small black humanoid crumbled and was completely forced out of his body. Yet the instant the small black humanoid was forced out, a ray of red light charged towards him from within Han Mountain Bell, something that even Tian did not notice. That red light was too quick. In the blink of an eye, it was already less than 3 feet away from Tian. Tian swung his arm, but that red light distorted and used its body to resist the power of Tian's swing. With a bang, that red light crumbled and turned into a bloody mess. It was the small snake. Yet even though its body had crumbled, its head remained, and it bit down on Tian's palm, causing his left hand to instantly turn black. Tian's face was filled with anger. He had never been in such a pathetic state before, especially when his level of cultivation was much higher than Su Ming's. Yet at that moment, he was injured by Su Ming's various methods. The heavens can replace the attacks of men. This is the law of the heavens, replacing men. Tian's voice reverberated in the air, and his power erupted from his body. Just as he was about to completely shatter the small snake that had injured him, the illusory, nine-headed dragon's awakened heads moved at the same time. At the instant the small snake was about to be completely shaken to death, they rushed into Han Mountain Bell and opened their mouths to devour Dition. A violent boom reverberated in the air for a long time, but did not disappear. Instead, it became even stronger. For the first time, a large amount of cracks appeared on Han Mountain Bell. It crumbled, and while it might have gathered together once again after it crumbled, it was clear that it no longer possessed the spiritual aura it previously possessed. The nine-headed dragon let out a shrill scream of pain and exploded, turning into wisps of smoke that tumbled backwards in all directions. I think I can still go and write the 5th chapter. Can you guys give me some encouragement? Let me write the 5th chapter. To be continued. If you like this work, please come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 653. Han Mountain Bell fell back. The nine-headed dragon disappeared. The small candle dragon only had its head and a small amount of life force left, and it was flung far into the distance. Anger appeared on Dition's face. This sort of pathetic state was incredibly rare on him. How dare you use a mere replica of Eastern Wasteland's desert bell to seal me? Dition's hair was disheveled. His left hand was originally completely black. However, it was currently swiftly recovering its original color. Droplets of black liquid dripped from the wound caused by the small snake's bite. From the looks of it, it seemed that he would completely recover within a short period of time. Just as Dition took a huge step forward and was about to end what he believed to be a farce, a freezing glare shone in Su Ming's eyes. Immediately, as the clouds in the sky tumbled about, a shocking, thunderous roar rang out. The instant that thunderous roar rang out, a gigantic bolt of lightning descended at an unbelievable speed, and with a loud bang, it landed on Dition's body. The instant it landed, Dition's pupils shrank, and he disappeared in the span of a breath. The moment he disappeared, deafening thunder roared, and the space where Dition had disappeared completely shattered. Su Ming seized the air with his right hand, and a great sense of danger rose within him. Without a hint of hesitation, the welcoming of deities immediately appeared in his hand, and he swallowed it. At the instant he swallowed the welcoming of deities, Dition walked out from the air behind him. He lifted his right hand, and with a supreme, mighty pressure that he could not fight against, he pushed his palm down on the top of Su Ming's skull. The instant he pushed his palm down, the space around Su Ming was completely locked down, causing him to have no chance of avoiding that fatal strike. Once he was hit, Su Ming would lose all his memories. When he woke up once again, perhaps he would still be himself, but he would no longer be himself. Su Ming saw that the palm was coming towards him. His fate was sealed, but there was no such thing as complete certainty. There were always accidents in everything. Almost the instant Dition's palm, which he believed to be completely within his expectations, closed in on 3 inches from the top of Su Ming's skull, a ray of golden light suddenly spread out with a bang from Su Ming's body. There were 5 layers to that golden light. As it spread out, the first layer crumbled once it touched Dition's palm, but another layer appeared in the inner circle that was near Su Ming. As it crumbled, it increased and it spread. In this short period of time, tens of thousands of layers of the light screen had crumbled, but it did not collapse. It continued to exist. The 5 layers of golden light that would never disappear and would exist eternally was the 5-direction seal that was suppressing the second god of Berserker's left hand. This seal could suppress the god of Berserker's left hand, so there was no way Dition's clone could break through its might within a short period of time. Su Ming's presence continued rising within the screen of light. After he swallowed the welcoming of deities, the presence spreading out from his body was that of the second god of Berserkers. Dition was incredibly familiar with that presence, and his expression changed. But at the instant his expression changed, the 9-holed cauldron appeared once again in the clouds in the sky. There were originally 4 small holes that were occupied by lightning, but at that moment, only 3 of them still had lightning in them. Once it appeared, a red bolt of lightning descended from the sky with a bang and charged towards Dtion. I didn't expect you to be in control of Divine Will's lightning. As expected, Destiny will not give you even the slightest chance. But Divine Will's lightning and this 5-direction seal should be your last resort. I'd like to see just how you'll fight back once I open your 5-direction seal. The second god of Berserker's inheritance, With Dtion's intelligence, he could tell with just one glance that Su Ming could not control the 5-direction seal. This item had only appeared to protect him because of the second god of Berserker's presence on Su Ming's body. He might have said it was protection, but in truth, it was a seal. The people inside could not come out, and the people outside could not enter. Yet at that moment, to Dtion, the 5-direction seal's existence was truly protecting Su Ming. That was why even if he knew that this item was in truth a seal, he still chose to open it. With his power, he might not be able to open it within a short period of time, but when he lifted his head and cast a glance at the lightning in the sky, a cold sneer appeared on his lips. He lifted his right hand and pointed at the sky lightning, then lifted his left hand and pushed down on the screen of light within the 5-direction seal. With a bang, the red bolt of lightning landed on Dtion's body. He shuddered, and his body was instantly filled with lightning, but that lightning moved through his body and into his left hand before crashing into the 5-direction seal. Soon after, another bolt of lightning descended. Dtion let out a low growl and clenched his left hand into a fist. At the instant lightning gathered on his entire body, he rammed his fist against the 5-direction seal. When that punch landed, the 5-direction seal had already started showing signs of shattering due to the lightning. At that moment, as it continued shattering and shattering, the speed at which it recovered could not keep up with its destruction. What appeared outside was no longer a 5-layered screen of light, but only 3. Su Ming could not dodge. He might be within the 5-direction seal, but the area around him had been frozen, causing him to be unable to retreat, unable to fight back, unable to struggle, but he did not struggle. Instead, his eyes were calm as he stared at Dtion's actions. The black stone fragment on his neck was flashing. During this brief moment of safety, he had time to change his plan. At that moment, the final bolt of lightning fell from the sky. When it touched Dtion, a glint appeared in his eyes. He lifted his right hand, but just as he was about to touch the screen of light and transfer the divine will of heaven's lightning and his power to Su Ming so that he would not be injured and Su Ming would suffer the consequences of his actions, something unexpected happened. A cold sneer appeared at the corners of Su Ming's lips. During that instant, just as Dtion was about to make him withstand the divine lightning in his place, his body was filled with a layer of dark light, and he disappeared without a trace. Once he disappeared, the 5-direction seal also disappeared. Because of that, the power of the divine lightning Dtion had been about to transfer was instantly emptied. At that moment, Dtion's pupils shrank. With a bang, lightning erupted from his body, and an endless amount of lightning bolts covered his entire body, causing blood to trickle down the corners of his mouth for the first time in this battle. His body also felt numb due to the lightning, and his cultivation base froze for an instant. If it had been any other time, this would not have been a problem, but at that moment, almost at the same time Dtion's plan failed, Su Ming reappeared in midair after disappearing. This time, it was clear that he had already brought out the welcoming of deities when he stepped into the dimension in the stone fragment, which was why he was not blocked by the 5-direction seal. With one move, he charged towards Dtion. Dtion, this is my 9th gift to you. Su Ming's expression was cold. Killing intent shone in his eyes, and the black palm lines on his left hand swiftly pressed against the center of Dtion's brows. A loud bang reverberated in the air. As Dtion roared in anger, Su Ming coughed up blood, and just as his body was about to be bounced back, he lifted his right hand, and a black bone spike appeared. This was the god of Berserker's spike. Sima Xion's only remaining spike was the god of Berserker's spike. At the instant Su Ming was forced back, he warped and stabbed the god of Berserker's spike into Tion's chest without caring about the severity of his injuries. 5 chapters, 14,000-something words. Now that I've finished writing them, I feel as if I'm walking on clouds, and I feel as if I'm floating. I think I can see my monthly votes rising rapidly. Am I seeing things? 5 chapters. I'm begging for monthly votes. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 654. The god of Berserker's spike was entirely black. At the same time, it exuded a freezing aura. Droplets of freezing droplets also seeped out of it, exuding a heinous wave of resentment and madness. That resentment came from the second god of Berserkers, and that madness came from the intense pain and indignation he felt when his body was torn to shreds. That bone spike contained the second god of Berserker's resentment and madness, and its might was astonishing. At that moment, as Su Ming threw caution to the wind, it stabbed into Tion's chest. It even pierced through the Emperor's robe and sank 3 inches deep into Tion's flesh and blood. During that instant, the resentment and madness from the god of Berserker's spike surged into Tion's body with a bang, causing him to shudder. He let out a muffled groan, and his face turned pale. What could not be seen with the naked eye, but could be detected with divine sense, was that an illusory figure had appeared on Tion's body at that moment. That indistinct figure was surrounding Tion's body at that moment, and 2 huge hands had pierced through his body, as if they were seizing his soul and trying to drag it out. That illusory figure was the shadow formed by the second god of Berserker's resentment. It did not have any consciousness, but it was clear that its hatred towards Tion was carved into its bones. As it surrounded Tion, it let out roars that could only be heard by divine sense. The Herculean god spike melted at a speed visible to the naked eye and burrowed into the wound on Tion's chest. However, just as the melted Herculean god spike was about to burrow into Tion's body, a powerful golden light suddenly flashed outwards. With it, Su Ming could see a jade pendant on his chest. That jade pendant was entirely golden, and it was the pendant that was shining with that powerful golden light. When that golden light spread out, a power that caused Su Ming to tremble erupted forth from the pendant. The melted god of Berserkers spike tumbled backwards in that golden light and was forced away. The second god of Berserker's resentment that had surrounded Tion's body was also forced back layer by layer as the golden light spread outwards. Su Ming was illuminated by the golden light, and booming sounds rang out in his head. He took a few steps back, then bit the tip of his tongue so that he would immediately snap out of his daze. At the same time, he seized the air, and the spiked club manifested in his hand. As he lifted it up, he smashed it down on Tion. At that moment, his eyes were bloodshot, and he looked incredibly disheveled, but there was an unyielding presence surrounding him. As he swung the spiked mace, piercing whistling sounds filled the air as it charged towards Tion. With a loud bang, the spiked mace ruthlessly smashed into Tion's body. However, Tion lifted his left hand and caught it. Su Ming did not hesitate. Almost at the instant Tion lifted the spiked club, he let out a low growl. Explode! Su Ming endured the pain in his heart and still activated the divine sense he left in the spiked club, causing it to explode with a loud bang, and the impact that was formed swept towards Tion. That impact swept through the area, and Su Ming could not move forward. He was forced to take a few steps back. At the same time, Tion was also in a similarly disheveled state. He had withstood all of the spike club's impact, but due to the golden light spreading out, he was completely blocked by it. He was still standing in midair, surrounded by the golden light, but there was a deep gash on his chest. His face was pale under the golden light. "You're just asking for death," Tion roared. With golden light shining from his entire body, he took a step towards Su Ming. The instant his foot landed, Su Ming's heart let out a bang, as if it was about to shatter. If it was not because he had sacrificed all his bones, then his heart would have exploded the moment his foot landed. Yet even so, Su Ming still staggered. When he staggered a few steps back once again, Dition had already closed in on him. He did not cast any sort of divine ability, but lifted his right hand swiftly to seize Su Ming's neck. He was so quick that he closed in on Su Ming in an instant. The instant his hand touched Su Ming's neck, Su Ming used his right hand to fight against it. With that one block, his right hand was seized by Dition, and the bones in his right hand shattered. Then Dition lifted him up and threw him towards the island underneath. Su Ming's body turned into a shooting star, and with a bang, he crashed into the island. The island trembled viciously, and the edges of the island completely shattered before it was submerged by seawater. "Did you really think that I wouldn't kill you?" Dition cast a glance at his chest. The sharp pain was still there. During that instant just now, Su Ming had made him feel the shadow of death looming over his head. If his real self had not given him a protective treasure before he descended, then even if he did not die from that god of berserker spike just now, he would have been gravely injured. Su Ming's level of cultivation might not be enough to pose too much of a threat to him, but the methods he executed and the items he used made him apprehensive. At the instant Su Ming's body touched the ground on the island, he lifted his right hand and pushed it against the ground. As rumbling sounds reverberated in the air, blood trickled down the corners of his mouth. He fought back with great difficulty, but his entire right hand was twisted beyond recognition. Sharp pain shot through his body, causing cold sweat to break out on Su Ming's forehead. Once Dition's power dissipated, he coughed up a huge mouthful of blood once again. His face turned even paler, and he looked just like a dead man. The great difference between their levels of cultivation made it impossible for Su Ming to win against Dition's clone. As he retreated, the Dition in the sky closed in on him once again with a dark expression. There was a merciless, awe-inspiring look in his eyes. However, there was no despair on Su Ming's face. Instead, an even stronger fighting spirit surged into the sky. His eyes looked as if they were burning with fire. Almost at the same time Dition closed in on him and his body landed on the ground, he lifted his right hand and swung it before him. With it, light flowed through his right hand, and it returned to its normal state from its previous distortions. This was not healing his injuries. He was just forcefully using the power of berserker bones to return the shattered and dislocated bones in his right hand to their original positions. This sort of pain was even greater than the pain of being injured. "If you want my life, then you will have to pay a price you will not be able to bear." Su Ming endured the intense pain, lifted his right hand, and swung it at the sky. Sun Genesis. With it, wind immediately stirred up in the sky, filled with tumbling clouds. As it howled, it filled the entire area and turned into a gigantic vortex that charged towards Dition. Lunar Burial. Su Ming pushed down on the ground with his left hand, as if he had seized the ground, then lifted it up. With it, a second vortex appeared out of thin air with the island as its center. It swept through the area, causing the seawater around the island to retreat and a violent gust of wind to howl. Dition was at the center of the wind on the ground and the wind in the sky. At that moment, as the two whirlwinds howled, they swiftly crashed into each other. At the instant they crashed into each other, Dition let out a cold harumph. "With my orders, I will make the sky have no second eyes, and the earth have no second direction. This is the king's life. All dust, all wind, clouds, all emptiness, heed my orders and scatter." As Dition spoke, he formed a seal with his right hand and pointed upwards. With it, a loud voice immediately came from the sky. That voice was deafening, as if the sky was roaring, as if all manner of lives were roaring. There's only one word in that voice: scatter. That one word was like the will of the entire universe, like the king's order, and no one would be allowed to question it. It was as if all manner of lives were roaring at the same time. The instant that voice traveled out, the wind in the sky and earth crashed into each other. But before a loud rumbling sound could spread out, The two gusts of wind turned into emptiness right before Su Ming's eyes and disappeared. The island where Su Ming was also disappeared. The ground of the island turned into emptiness, and the entire sky also disappeared from Su Ming's eyes at that instant, as if everything no longer existed. Su Ming did not even have the chance to execute the third style of wind separation. As the first two styles crumbled to dust, it died just like that. At the same time, a palm appeared in the air along with Tian and pressed down on the top of Su Ming's skull. An awe-inspiring and hoarse voice reverberated in the world filled with emptiness. All the signs of change will be wiped away now. Su Ming had absolutely no way of fighting back. His body looked as if it had been frozen in midair. No matter how many divine abilities he had, he could not struggle. That palm had already pressed down on the top of his skull. All the wrong paths you took will be set right now. A bang went off in Su Ming's head, and a powerful wave of power surged in his mind to seal everything, to sweep through everything, to carry out that so-called setting things right. All the memories of this life will disappear now. The scenes of the past gradually became indistinct in Su Ming's memories, as if that wave of power had thrown everything into chaos, causing them to leave Su Ming's consciousness in the midst of chaos, causing his mind to turn blank once again after being sealed layer by layer. I will bestow upon you. It was Tian's voice, but before he could finish speaking, a cry of surprise suddenly traveled forth. What shocked him was none other than the things that had happened in the Candle Dragon's undying and imperishable world as Su Ming wiped off his memories. The undying and imperishable world, the fight against his will, the desire to live, the roars that told him to never forget himself, and the words "I am Su Ming" carved repeatedly on the Candle Dragon's gigantic stone statue. All of these things erupted forth with a great amount of resistance when Tian was about to wipe them off. That resistance was Su Ming's will, his refusal to submit to everything in the world in the undying and imperishable world, his refusal to forget his will and his struggle even when he was in the cycle of reincarnation, and also his furious roar against fate. I am Su Ming. No one can wipe away my memories. No one can make me sink into oblivion. No one can snatch away everything that belongs to me from my hands. A bang went off in Su Ming's head, and during that instant, he completely woke up. The world before his eyes shattered, and the empty sky turned into clouds once again. The island that had disappeared appeared under his feet once again, and the sounds of waves reverberated in his ears once again. Besides the whirlwind, everything around him returned to normal. First update, please get monthly votes. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 655. If the Candle Dragon's undying and imperishable world did not exist, then Su Ming, who had come this far, would have to face the inevitable fate of sinking into oblivion. Perhaps when he woke up again, he would see an unfamiliar dark mountain, or perhaps it would not be called Dark Mountain anymore, but there would still be a place waiting for him. Then he would continue growing. Perhaps he would also go through destruction, go through many things, and perhaps he would also discover that there was always a pair of eyes watching him. Perhaps he would come this far, or perhaps he would walk down destiny's path according to someone else's instructions. However, Hong Luo's appearance was like a plan that had been set up beforehand. A sudden accident happened, and this accident caught everyone off guard. No one could have predicted it beforehand, which was why Tian's first clone did not hesitate to show himself to correct this matter. He succeeded because Hong Luo died, but he also failed because Su Ming woke up, because the awakened Su Ming had completely broken free from Tian's control. Everything that happened to him after that was his own fortuitous encounter, not someone else's instructions. It was especially so for the undying and imperishable world. Because of Tian's servant's action, which he thought was smart, it caused the will of this person who had struggled to crawl out of the cycle of reincarnation was rarely seen. At that moment, when Su Ming woke up, The shock in Tion's heart caused him to look at him with an incredibly grave expression. During their meeting this time, Su Ming had given him far too many surprises. First, he had injured him. Then he had even woken up from oblivion. All of these things caused a grave expression to appear on Tion's face. And at the same time, a single thought became stronger in his heart. No matter what, I must change him today, or else if I give him more time, I might have to come here with my real self. It has only been a few years, and he has already gone through such a shocking change. Destiny, as expected of destiny, an abyss builder. A freezing glare shone in Tion's eyes. He lifted his right hand swiftly and pointed towards Su Ming, who was swiftly retreating once he woke up. Wanderer on your way home. The fog is your eyes, and the sky is your guide. Do you know that the sky is lost? Tion's voice was filled with a strange rhythm, and as he drew a line with his finger, he pointed towards Su Ming. Immediately, clumps of green threads appeared around his body. These green threads spread out rapidly, and in the blink of an eye, they had covered the entire area. They looked like a huge ball of threads, and the balls of threads spread out in all directions, covering the entire area. As Su Ming retreated, the green threads seemed to be moving slowly, but they were spreading towards him at an incredible speed, as if they wanted to surround his entire body and surround him in layers. Tion's figure could no longer be seen before Su Ming. He was surrounded by those green threads coming towards him from all directions. He could not avoid them, and he could not hide from them. Su Ming's face was pale. His right hand was still throbbing in pain. He panted harshly, but not a hint of despair could be seen in his eyes. That flickering light was like a star burning resplendently, revealing an overflowing battle intent. Even if he died, he would die standing, and he would laugh without regrets. I, Su Ming, can die, but even if I die, I will make you pay. If I die, I will make the immortal's blood surge into the sky. If I die, I will make the universe no longer have any thoughts. Su Ming laughed loudly. When the green threads closed in on him and were less than 100 feet away from him, he lifted his right hand and opened his mouth. Immediately, a fan appeared in his hand. That fan looked like it was formed by an endless amount of feathers, and light shone from it. As he swung the fan, it immediately swelled up, and when Su Ming held it in his hand, he swung it forward. This fan was the one Su Ming had snatched from Sima Xian. It was a treasure personally refined by the second god of berserkers, and it was also something that belonged to Su Ming. Art of the three barren lands of heaven, earth, and man, heaven barren. With that one fan, a deafening sound came from the sky that was filled with rolling clouds. The sky collapsed and shattered inch by inch. The entire sky was pitch black, and with one wave of the fan, it was as if layers of the sky were being pushed back. The shattered pieces started to move, causing the sky to look as if it had been completely lifted up. The shattered pieces were mixed with the power of the sky, and as the fan moved, they were lifted up and charged towards the green threads in the area. Loud booming sounds shook the sky and reverberated in the air. The power of heaven barrenness seemed to have turned the sky into a curtain, and when it lifted it up, it swept up the green threads. As the booming sounds reverberated in the air, the green threads that were spreading towards Su Ming started trembling simultaneously. Three barrenness art of heaven, earth, and man, earth barrenness. Su Ming swung the fan in his hand once again. That fan started trembling, and as it did so, the island underneath let out a bang, and as the seawater roared and tumbled backwards, it was lifted up by Su Ming's fan. The island had shrunk, but it was still an island and a small piece of land. At that moment, booming sounds surged into the sky. The island let out a hum and flew up from the surface of the sea, bringing with it an endless amount of seawater that poured down from midair like a curtain of rain. As it flew up, the ground on the island crumbled and turned into an endless amount of shards that crashed into the green threads once again, and the strongest sound under the barrenness of heaven and earth barrenness rang out. A presence that could suppress everything erupted forth, and with Su Ming as the center, it swept out in all directions. Su Ming's face turned much paler, but he did not stop moving his hand. Instead, he swung the fan once again. This time, it was the final style of the divine ability that not even Sima Xin could execute. 3 Baroness art of heaven, earth, and man, human barrenness. Once this art was executed, the collapsing world rumbled. The endless amount of shattered stones shot through the green threads and charged towards Su Ming. In the blink of an eye, they covered his entire body, and in an instant, they gathered together to form a gigantic head with Su Ming as the center. The appearance of that head was the same as Su Ming's. The collapsing sky also fused into the eyes of the gigantic head of Earth, causing a brilliant light to shine within them. At the instant the head was formed, Su Ming opened his mouth and blew out a puff of air towards the sullen Di Tian, standing not too far away. That puff of air turned into a black gust of wind that swept towards Di Tian. That black gust of wind could shatter the sky, destroy the earth, and extinguish the flames of life. The second god of Berserker's divine ability. Di Tian looked at Su Ming with a dark expression. When he saw the black gust of wind blowing out and the black gust of wind that looked like a layer of black fog closing in on him, he let out a cold harumph. It's a pity. If the second had cast it, then this clone of mine wouldn't have been his opponent. But since you cast it, you're simply too weak. As Di Tian spoke, he lifted his left hand and slashed down at the incoming black gust of wind. With that one slash, the black fog started trembling, and the center of it instantly caved in. A crack had been sliced open by that invisible slash. The moment that crack appeared, Di Tian took a step forward. He was so quick that he shot through the crack in an instant and appeared right before the gigantic head of Earth that was Su Ming. He lifted his right hand and pressed his palm against the center of the head's brows. Cloud parting, Di Tian said flatly. The instant his palm touched Su Ming's gigantic head, it shot through it. Di Tian did not slow down in the slightest. Once he stepped into the center of the head's brows, he charged into its depths. At that moment, a loud bang came from the head, and an endless amount of cracks that could be seen with the naked eye appeared on it. Eventually, it shattered into pieces and exploded. Yet the instant it exploded, Di Tian's right index finger touched the 5-layered golden screen of light. That screen of light flashed viciously, and as it continued shattering, Di Tian was forced back by the impact. An endless amount of shattered stones fell from the sky, and golden light filled the air. Su Ming stood within that golden light, and the presence of the second god of Berserkers could be clearly felt from his body. During the most critical moment, Su Ming fused with the welcoming of deities once again without any hesitation, causing his presence and body to change, and he looked as if he had turned into the second god of Berserkers. This again, as Di Tian retreated, his expression turned even darker. Su Ming's 5-direction seal was a huge headache to him. It was precisely because of this seal that Su Ming had stabbed into his body with the god of Berserker's spike. Even now, he still could not recover from it, and his condition was still worsening. It was already starting to affect his ability to bring out his power. Do you really think that I can't break this art? If Sir Dao Chun had just placed this item down, I would naturally not have been able to break it, but now, the spirit in this item has long since disappeared. It won't be difficult for me to break it. The heavens protect you, and no one will not prosper. Like a high mountain, like a ridge, like a hill, like the direction of a river, there is nothing that does not increase. Like the permanence of the moon, like the rise of the sun, like the longevity of the South Mountain, never collapsing, like the lush pines and cypresses, there is nothing that cannot be borne by you. The heavens protect Jiru and grant it to me. Di Tian formed a seal with his hands, and, as he said each word, the seals on his hands would change rapidly. When he finished saying all 9 words, he had also finished forming all the seals. He pushed his hands forward, and 9 gigantic words immediately appeared in the air before him, such as These 9 RU gave off an ancient aura, as well as a primordial feeling. At the same time they appeared, DTon's avatar actually aged quite a bit. Clearly, this heaven protection art of 9 RU was not ordinary. Otherwise, he would not have used Su Ming's divine will's lightning to break it, instead of executing it himself. All of this happened in the blink of an eye when DTon pointed forward. The 9 words charged towards Su Ming, but he did not dodge. Instead, a glint appeared in his eyes, and he simply allowed the 9 words to touch the screen of light from the 5-direction seal. At the instant the 9th word fell, the screen of light stopped shining, and with a speed visible to the naked eye, it disappeared from Su Ming's body. Su Ming did not understand the principle behind its disappearance, but he could sense a presence of life for the 9 words. At the instant the screen of light from the 5-direction seal disappeared, DTon took a step forward, and Su Ming lifted his head swiftly. There was still blood at the corners of his mouth that had yet to dry, but he had been waiting for the moment the screen of light disappeared. The screen of light might be able to defend, but Su Ming did not want to defend, but to attack. That was why he allowed DTon to suppress the screen of light. Once it disappeared and DTon closed in on him, Su Ming lifted his head, opened his mouth, and let out the roar he had turned into the second god of berserkers. The god of berserkers roar. Second update, monthly votes. To be continued. If you like this work, please come and cast a recommendation vote or monthly vote. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 656. It was not as if Su Ming had never thought about escaping. But while the world might be big, where could he run to? How long could he hide? Forget the difficulty of escaping from DTon's pursuit. It was already impossible for him to successfully escape from this great disaster. This was a disaster. He could not avoid it, and neither did Su Ming want to avoid it. This disaster was not one where he was doomed to eternal damnation, and it was not a suppression where he could not fight back. He could still fight back. In fact, he had even injured DTon. In fact, he had been so close to dealing a heavy blow to DTon just now. Perhaps he would not have this chance again, but Su Ming would not back down. What is there to fear about death? Even if I die, once I go through reincarnation, my will wake up. Even if I die, one of these days I will still stand here and fight against fate. At the instant the screen of light was suppressed and disappeared, Su Ming's roar turned into a wave of sound formed by him fighting against fate. That wave of sound contained his will, contained his life, and contained Su Ming's unyieldingness throughout his life. Roar. Even someone as powerful as DTon could not help but come to a halt in the face of that roar. His robes fluttered, and his hair danced in the air. What shook him was not the power of that roar, but the unyielding presence contained within it. You can't accept this, huh? Once you sink into depravity and become obedient, I will make you accept this. DTon narrowed his eyes and took a step towards Su Ming. He was already impatient, and he intended to forcefully end this battle. With the fastest speed possible, he would bring order to Su Ming so that he could be at ease and fight against his mortal enemy, evil sect of Eastern Wastelands, with his other clone. As he moved forward, a black sea of fire appeared under his feet. That sea of fire burned fiercely and swept outwards to cover the entire area. Wherever it went, the air would burn. The Dead Sea underneath also started boiling, and a large amount of water vapor filled the air like fog. With an incredibly domineering presence, DTon charged towards Su Ming as the black sea of fire spread out. With each step, his presence surged like a tidal wave, and it was as if there was no power that could make him stop for even a single moment at that moment. Su Ming lifted his left hand and pushed his palm towards the sky. With it, an ancient glare appeared in his eyes. He remembered the second god of Berserker's warm left hand. The god of Berserker's palm prince. As he spoke and DTon closed in on him, black lines swiftly appeared in the black sea of fire that surged into the sky between Su Ming and DTon. These lines intersected with each other and looked like fine black threads. As they filled the air, they turned into a gigantic palm print. The palm lines formed the outline of a palm, and it was the god of Berserker's palm. At that moment, as Dtion closed in and the black sea of fire spread out, the gigantic palm print in the sky pressed down on Dtion. It was so fast that it closed in on him in an instant. From afar, this scene looked like a soul-stirring painting. In the painting, there was a palm pressing downwards. Below it, flames surged into the sky, and the person walking out from the sea of flames was Dtion. He did not even spare a glance at the palm print in the sky. As he walked towards Su Ming, he simply allowed the palm print to close in on him. However, the sea of fire around him surged up and rose from his body to charge into the sky, crashing into the palm print. This was the god of Berserker's palm print crashing into the sea of fire. The booming sounds in the world reached their peak. This was the clash of two types of power. At the instant they crashed into each other, booming sounds shook the entire area, and the impact swept up the Dead Sea underneath and swept outwards, causing a gigantic vortex to appear on the surface of the sea right under Su Ming and Dtion. That vortex rotated with loud, booming sounds, and the buried ground could be seen in the depths of it. Your growth might have surpassed my expectations, but you're still too weak. Dtion took a step forward, and the palm print in the sky shattered under the impact from the sea of fire. Blood trickled out of the corners of Su Ming's mouth. As he fell backwards, Dtion disappeared. When he reappeared, he was already behind Su Ming. He lifted his right hand and swung his arm. Immediately, Su Ming's body flew towards Dtion against his will. Let's end this battle. Yet at that moment, Dtion's pupils shrank. Without any hesitation, he took 4 steps back. At the instant he did so, a wave of flames rose up from all over Su Ming's body, and it was burning. This was the burning of all his blood and his cultivation base. Just like Sima Xian had done in the past, Su Ming had burned his blood and activated the strongest power of the second god of Berserker's inheritance. It could be known as the god of Berserker's transformation. Fusing with the welcoming of deities would only give him the inheritance and allow him to execute the divine abilities of the god of Berserkers. However, if he wanted to truly bring out its power, Su Ming was the same as Sima Xian. He needed time, and if he wanted to forcefully execute it, then he would need the god of Berserker's transformation, burning his blood to turn into the god of Berserkers. As Su Ming burned, his hair became a mixture of black and white. As his body trembled, he lifted his head swiftly. A cold, callous, and crazed look appeared in his eyes. With one step, he instantly appeared before Dtion and hurled his fist forward. At the instant his fist landed, Dtion frowned and lifted his foot to kick Su Ming's leg. With a bang, Su Ming took a few steps back, but his fist still landed on Dtion's body. However, at the instant his fist landed, golden light shone on Dtion's body, and he was completely unharmed. Dtion narrowed his eyes and walked towards Su Ming. He suddenly liked seeing Su Ming like this. The more unyielding he was, the more interested he was in making him submit. This feeling made him feel incredibly good. His footsteps were not quick, but with each step he took, ripples would appear in the air, as if the sky had turned into water. As Su Ming retreated, he lifted his right hand and pressed it against his chest. The blood he coughed up rose into the sky with a swing of his arm. God of Berserker's transformation of the stars, sun, and moon, murderous stars. As Su Ming spoke, a group of stars immediately appeared in the broken layer of clouds and the dark sky. Those stars shone with starlight, and once they covered the entire sky, they descended swiftly, as if there were stars falling from the sky, causing the sky to tremble. A wave of murderous aura that came from the galaxy swiftly appeared in the area. As the murderous aura appeared, starlight that seemed to have gained physical form intersected with each other. At the same time it shone on the ground, a strange scene appeared. In that scene, all the starlight distorted and charged towards Dtion like arrows. When anyone looked over, The arrows formed by the starlight that filled the sky could dazzle a person's eyes. The murderous aura also rushed into a person's body, causing their cultivation bases to freeze up. Tion's pupils shrank. Almost at the instant the murderous aura and the arrows closed in on him, he opened his mouth. Stars have their own trajectories, and there are also places where starlight cannot shine. With my orders, I, Tion, mark this place as a place that cannot be bathed in starlight. This is the law of the heavens. Once he said those words, every single word he said turned into a runic symbol that flew out and disappeared into the air. When he finished speaking, the murderous aura from the murderous aura Su Ming had cast with the murderous stars disappeared without a trace. The starlight also turned black in an instant, and even the galaxy in the sky became indistinct. It was as if a law had been changed, causing Su Ming's divine ability to be forcefully stopped. You should be proud that you made me use the power of law. What other divine abilities do you have? Cast them again. Let me see just what you've learned during the time we haven't seen each other. Tion walked towards Su Ming slowly with a calm expression on his face. Bitterness rose in Su Ming's heart. When he saw Tion walking towards him, he gritted his teeth and lifted his right hand to strike his forehead. With it, the berserker bones in his body let out cracking sounds. As his cultivation base spread out, he lifted his hands and formed the picture of a moon. God of berserker, star, sun, and moon transformation, moon slaughter. When Su Ming spoke, the indistinct galaxy was suddenly no longer an illusion. Once all the stars became dull, a crescent moon appeared in the night sky. Almost the instant the crescent moon appeared, an illusionary shadow of the moon that looked exactly the same appeared around Tion. That shadow enveloped him completely, causing Tion's footsteps to come to a halt. He lifted his head and cast a glance at the moon in the sky. Not bad. This art is still quite interesting. As he spoke, cracks appeared on his skin. The appearance of those cracks was also the instant the moonlight in the sky started showing signs of crumbling. A glint appeared in Tion's eyes. He lifted his right hand and seized at the air. A ray of purple light appeared in his hand, and as that purple light shone, a long purple sword manifested. That sword was 9 feet and 9 inches long. It exuded a piercing cold presence, as well as the majestic presence of an emperor. It was as if wherever it went, all the swords in the world would have to worship it, because it was the emperor of swords. The instant the sword appeared, Su Ming felt a sharp stab of pain in his heart. He widened his eyes and looked at the sword. He suddenly had a strong feeling that this sword was not Tion's, but Su Ming's. That feeling came suddenly, but it was incredibly strong, as if this sword was a part of his life. Yet at that moment, that sword was held in the hands of Tion's clone. Tion looked at Su Ming and smiled. He lifted his right hand, and with the sword in his hand, he casually slashed down at the moon in the sky. With that one slash, the heavens roared and time itself suffocated. The moon in the sky exploded with a bang, and even the galaxy itself shattered. The sword sliced through the sky, and there was even a ray of sword aura that sliced down on Su Ming's head with a howl. Abyss sword. At this moment, even Tion's clone didn't notice that there was an extremely beautiful young lady in a certain broken cloud layer in the sky. She was originally munching on melon seeds as she watched the battle below. However, her eyes were now wide open as she stared at the sword in Tion's hand. By her side was a shrunken yellow dragon. It had a bitter look on its face, but with incredible agility, it swallowed all the shells of the melon seeds the girl had thrown away, not sparing even a single one. This is the 3rd chapter, and there will be more chapters. I'm writing it now. I'm begging for monthly votes. To be continued. If you like this work, please come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 657. The Abyss Sword was just as its name implied. It was like the sword of the abyss. That sword cut open the sky and sliced through the vast sky. Behind that endless sky was a dazzling galaxy that penetrated through the endless fog. That galaxy was where the immortals were. It was bright young emptiness. There were an innumerable amount of cultivation planets in this place, and there were a large amount of floating planets. Su Ming had personally come to this place before, and that was when he was on the ancient bronze sword. Hizzle had also come to this place once before, and that was when he killed Sima Xian. At that moment, there was a gigantic vortex in the galaxy that stretched to an unknown distance. A shocking whistle came from within that vortex, and soon after, as the fog tumbled about furiously, a ray of sword aura flew out. That sword aura was naturally the sword Tion had slashed toward the sky just now. It shot through the sky, the fog, and all obstacles before flying out of the vortex and appearing in the galaxy. At the instant it appeared, it disappeared without a trace at the edge of eastern wastelands. Above the Dead Sea in the land of berserkers was Su Ming, who was in midair. At that moment, a ray of sword aura was charging towards him. It was so quick that it closed in on him in the blink of an eye. At the instant the sword aura closed in on him, Su Ming closed his eyes. His right palm was facing upwards, and the back of his left hand was facing downwards. At the instant he closed his eyes, a whirlwind appeared around him. As it rotated with a loud bang, it hit Su Ming's body. In a whirlwind that no one could see, Su Ming's body turned into that of a teenager. His hair turned purple and white, and at that moment, Destiny's presence appeared on his body. A loud bang shook the sky and earth. When the sword aura touched the whirlwind, it did not have any form of resistance. It was torn apart and tumbled backwards, allowing the sword aura to pass through it and charge towards Su Ming, who was within it. However, the scene that followed caused Tion to be shocked for the first time in this battle. This sort of shock was countless times more intense than when he faced the Herculean god's thorn. He widened his eyes in disbelief. He saw that the sword aura had already pierced through the shattered whirlwind and was charging towards Su Ming. But for some unknown reason, the shattered whirlwind gathered together once more, and the sword aura that had pierced through it actually fell back. Just like everything that happened just now, time had been reversed. If that was all there was to it, Tion would not have been too shocked. What truly shocked him was the aura coming from the recovering whirlwind that made his heart tremble. There was no way he could mistake that aura. There was no way he could forget that aura. That aura caused him to almost lose control of his mind. Destiny. At the same time he said these words, a thin and frail figure walked out of the vortex where Su Ming was. When he walked out of the vortex, he swung his right hand behind him, and only then did the whirlwind disappear. What appeared in front of Tion was a youth Destiny, who had half a head of white hair and the other half purple hair. That's impossible. You haven't woken up in Berserker's Realm Mountain. You're still sealed. It's impossible for you to become Destiny ahead of time. This isn't you. This isn't Su Ming. This isn't the Destiny I want. Tion seemed to have gone berserk. At this moment, his expression was vicious. It was as if a fatal flaw had appeared in the plan he had prepared for a very, very long time. He could not accept such a sudden development. This isn't your path. Tion took a step forward and charged towards Su Ming at the speed of lightning. For the first time, a monstrous killing intent appeared on his body. He might have attacked previously, but he had never thought about killing Su Ming. He had only wanted to set things right. Yet now, that killing intent was incredibly clear. This isn't the path you want to take. This isn't the destiny I've prepared for so long, and even though I've failed time and time again, I still have hope of succeeding. This isn't you. Tion roared. In an instant, he closed in on Su Ming, and as he lifted his right hand, he pointed a finger at Su Ming's throat. He wanted to kill. Su Ming, who had turned into Destiny, had a calm expression on his face as he looked at Tion, closing in on him coldly. At the instant that finger was about to land on him, he did not dodge, but before Tion's finger could land on him, Tion's body started moving backwards before Su Ming, as if time was flowing in reverse and his movements were being reversed. This change caused Tion's pupils to shrink, and for the first time, terror appeared in his eyes. He was not terrified because he could not fight against the entanglement of time. Instead, he was terrified of a disaster that was even more shocking than the first god of Berserker's era, which had happened many years ago in the land of immortals. That disaster was a terrifying nightmare to the entire true Morning Dao world. It was also because of that disaster that the immortals and true Morning Dao world, which had not recovered for many years, were trampled on by the first god of Berserkers. At the instant Tion's body was forced backwards, Su Ming took a step forward, lifted his right hand, and tapped the center of Tion's brows. A loud bang reverberated in the air, and golden light shone on Tion's entire body. At the instant he negated that power, a glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes, and the golden light that was spreading out immediately disappeared, causing Tion to no longer have the protection of that golden light. Su Ming lifted his foot and stomped on Tion's body. With a bang, Tion fell back. Su Ming charged forward, and once he caught up to him in an instant, he swung his left hand, and at the same time changed once again, he tapped the center of Tion's brows. After doing this several times, Tion coughed up a mouthful of blood, but he swiftly regained his senses. I'd rather not have this plan than let you continue living. I'll completely destroy your consciousness in this place. Tion lifted his right hand and pushed his fingers forward. At the instant Su Ming closed in on him, he pushed forward. With that one push, a sound that sounded like a mirror breaking rang in the air. The entanglement of time around Tion instantly shattered in an unseen manner, and he clenched his right hand into a fist before him. White Sun Ascension, Tion said languidly. His other clone had cast this divine ability in the past. At that moment, he executed it once again, and a powerful white light spread out from his right hand. That white light was so bright that it dyed the entire world. As his right hand clenched into a fist and pointed to the sky, a white sun suddenly appeared in the sky. That white sun looked like a falling star, causing the surface of the sea beneath to sink in with a loud bang, causing seawater to spread outwards, and the entire world was dyed in white. The light shining from the sun had become the most powerful light in the world. The apocalypse of White Sun. He lifted his left hand slowly, and that was the sign of ascension. As his right hand drew closer to the white sun, this process was the sign of ascension. Su Ming, who had turned into destiny, was standing not too far away at that moment. His expression was calm, and within his eyes was a resolute and aloof look, along with a hint of reluctance to part with his life, as well as a deep regret towards his hometown and the ninth summit that had been buried in the depths of his memories. The secret of Dark Mountain. If I can still remember it in my next life, I will search for it. Master, I'm leaving now. I still haven't found you. This is the regret of my life. Eldest senior brother, second senior brother, if there is another life, let us be fellow disciples again. I will take my leave first. Huzi, third senior brother. A smile appeared on Su Ming's face. At that moment, a destructive presence spread out from his body. This was the burning of his life. He was using everything in his life to push the thread of God of Berserker's hair on his lifted right index finger. That strand of hair had been able to kill Tion's clone in the past. There was not much of it left now, and Su Ming knew that it could not do it. That was why he had used all sorts of methods to fight against Tion, all for the sake of injuring him and weakening him. It was a pity that the difference between his level of cultivation and Tion's was too great. He could only injure him, albeit with great difficulty. He could not weaken him too much. Oh well. Su Ming lifted his right hand, and it started burning. All of his life was gathered on his right hand at that moment, gathered on that tiny strand of the god of Berserker's hair. That strand of hair immediately started burning, and the power that belonged to the first god of Berserkers erupted from Su Ming's body at that instant. This time, even though it was just a sliver, it was even stronger than in the past, because this time, Su Ming's life and Destiny's power had fused into it. Destiny's power was the overlapping of the past and the future. It was the strand of hair in Su Ming's hand and his life that continued rising and gathering together as it burned. It was also the ripples of power that were becoming increasingly stronger in his entire body. The sky was white. The white sun shone on everything and covered everything. As Dition let out a low roar and his hands approached, the endless white light erupted with the strongest power of his mystic art. At that moment, Su Ming's right index finger no longer continued accumulating power. Instead, he charged towards the white light in the world, towards where Dition was like a shooting star, and pointed towards him. It was also at that moment that the girl hidden in the clouds in the white sky had a solemn expression on her beautiful face. She looked as if she was hesitating, but in the end, she gritted her teeth. "Oh well, I'll just save him this once." As she spoke, she lifted her hand, and her face instantly turned pale. Green light appeared on her hand, and she pushed downwards. Dition did not notice in the white world, and neither did the girl notice that once Su Ming pointed towards his life, a song from the sun reverberated around him. Only he could hear that song, and at the same time it appeared, a bone sun flew out from his body. That sun had been given to him by the old sun maker. "What is life, child? This is the path you chose. Do you understand?" This was the final voice Su Ming heard before he lost consciousness. A loud bang that shook the sky and earth stirred up a roar that lingered for a long time on the Dead Sea beyond eastern wastelands. 4 chapters, 12,000 words. 3 days, 4-5 for chapters. I'm fighting. I'm fighting with everything I have. I beg for monthly votes. There are only 5.5 days until the end of the month. During these 5.5 days, I will continue fighting. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 658. A disaster, a natural disaster, and a dazzling brilliance. Destruction was the most beautiful thing in the world. At the instant the world was destroyed, everything would turn into a picture that would last for eternity. All those who had the right to see this dazzling moment would be able to see it become an eternal memory in their lives when death arrived. The surface of the sea in a circular area of several hundreds of leagues sank several hundreds of feet at that moment. It was a grief that had been reduced to nothingness by the impact of the attack. At that moment, the entire world was white. That white was the mist, the sunlight, and the energy of heaven and earth colliding. As the seawater continued to sink, the water at the edges of the sea could no longer fill the gap, and the seawater in the area began to sink. The woman's face was pale in the sky. She leaned against the yellow dragon, and as it charged forward, it brought her into the endless expanse of white and swiftly left into the distance. This is all I can do. This is Death Void. My level of cultivation has been greatly suppressed. My friend from the Abyss Builders, whether or not you can survive will depend on your fate. The woman closed her eyes and disappeared into the sky in the distance, leaving the white region. She had helped Su Ming resist most of the power from that strike just then. At that moment, she was incredibly weak, and she needed to heal herself as soon as possible. As she left, the white in the region continued surrounding her. As the booming sounds continued, Dition took a few steps back and coughed up a mouthful of blood. His face was pale. The crown on his head had shattered, and there were many tears on the emperor's robe on his body. There was even blood at the corners of his mouth, and there was a bleak, murderous look on his face. During that instant just now, he had clearly felt Su Ming's resistance increase exponentially, and there was also another wave of power that was fighting against his divine ability with Su Ming. But that was not all. During that instant just now, Dition had also felt another wave of power descend from the sky. Because of that, he was now facing 3 parties alone. Fortunately, the power of his divine ability was incredibly shocking, which was why he was able to move back with great difficulty once they crashed into each other. However, he had also paid a great price for it. The golden light on his body was no longer around, because the jade pendant had shattered. Su Ming, killing intent appeared in Dition's eyes. Once he took a few steps back, he swung his arm, and the white around him immediately faded away. With one move, he charged forward. He could sense that the person who had sent down that power from the sky had already left into the distance. He might not know who that person was, but to Tian, killing Su Ming was the most important thing at that moment. That was why he did not bother about that person, and instead charged towards the spot where he had sensed Su Ming with his divine sense. As the white light faded away and the area around him became clear, Tian saw Su Ming, who still looked like a teenager, lying in the air several thousands of feet away. He had his eyes closed and was unconscious, but he did not fall to the ground. Instead, there was a gigantic sun made of bone under his body. That sun was about 30 feet big, and at that moment, it was letting out the sounds of a sun. There was also the light of relocation surrounding it. That light was flashing even more brightly, a clear sign that the relocation would be activated very soon. Once the relocation was activated, Su Ming would disappear right before Tian's eyes once again, and it would mean that he had survived this great disaster. In fact, Tian could already imagine that if he allowed Su Ming to leave as he had planned, then there was a high possibility that he would find it difficult to find him within a short period of time, just like he did a few days ago. If he had not fought against Su Ming, Tian would not have paid too much attention to this matter. He would have found Su Ming sooner or later in the world of berserkers. However, Tian had seen Su Ming's improvement during the battle just then. That improvement made him feel that if he was given more time, then it would be even more difficult for him to suppress Su Ming next time. More importantly, he had seen destiny. This was a scene that caused Tian's heart to tremble, to the point that he was practically trembling. No matter what, he had not expected that destiny would wake up ahead of schedule. This was not part of his plan. This had completely exceeded his expectations, and it was especially so when he remembered the great disaster that fell upon True Morning Dao world in the past. He remembered that terrifying legend and thought that all of this might happen again in the near future, and all of this was caused by him. How could he not be terrified? How could he not be afraid? At that moment, when he saw Su Ming fainting and losing all his ability to fight, but still about to be relocated by the Bone Sun, a freezing glare immediately appeared in Tian's eyes. He took a swift step forward, intending to stop all of this from happening. Before he came to search for Su Ming, he had not expected that Su Ming would be so difficult to deal with. He had actually managed to make him fall into such a pathetic state and make him pay so much. I absolutely can't give him any chance. Tian lifted his right hand and swung it in the direction of the sky. With it, the empty sky, the sea beneath him, and all the dimensions in the area looked as if they had frozen up. As booming sounds reverberated in the air, the entire area was sealed off, along with all the power of relocation that could leave this place. I'd like to see how you'll. Tian laughed coldly. When his foot landed, he disappeared, and in an instant he appeared right before the Bone Sun, where Su Ming was. Yet the instant he appeared, Tian's pupils shrank, and disbelief appeared on his face. This sort of expression was incredibly rare to see on him. It was because he saw that not only did the light of relocation from the Bone Sun not diminish, even though the area had been completely sealed off, it had instead erupted with a piercing light the instant he arrived. As that light shone, Tian could only watch as Su Ming's body became semi-transparent as he lay on the sun. The power of law. Shock appeared on Tian's face. He knew clearly that only the power of law could be used to relocation this place, even after his clone had sealed it off. Only those who had reached Life Palace and understood the ripples of the laws in the world could do this, because his real self could do it as well. However, his real self could not come here. His clone could not do this due to his level of cultivation. The instant he saw Su Ming's body disappearing, Tian let out a furious roar. He knew that he could not stop this relocation that surpassed his level of cultivation. In fact, he could even tell that the ripples of power that had taken Su Ming away did not come from the land of berserkers. Instead, it seemed to have descended from another world, and because of that, it destroyed his plan causing the disaster to Su Ming to disappear just like that. However, Di Tian could not accept this. As he roared in anger, red appeared in his eyes. Almost at the instant Su Ming disappeared along with the Bone Sun, Di Tian's voice reverberated in the world. His voice was like thunder, and it contained his will. As that will spread out, it caused the sky and the land of berserkers to tremble. With my will, I will activate the Immortal's vessel and bring down the void of Een and death, destiny's heavenly punishment. At the instant Di Tian said those words, a gigantic vortex appeared in the sky. The appearance of that vortex caused the clouds and fog in the distance to tumble backwards. If anyone lifted their heads and looked over, it was as if the sky had changed. Far above the sky was an indistinct layer of fog. There was no end to it. Su Ming had moved through it in the past, and he had been on the ancient bronze sword. At that moment, that layer of fog was right behind the vortex in the sky. In fact, the vortex's appearance was also formed by that fog. It was as if the sky in this region had turned transparent, or perhaps more accurately speaking, a gigantic hole had appeared in it. Behind the endless fog was a galaxy that Su Ming had seen before. That galaxy was dazzling. If anyone stood in that galaxy and looked towards Een Death region, they would be able to see the endless vortex of fog, as well as the 9 cultivation planets around it. Those 9 cultivation planets surrounded the vortex as if they were guarding it. At that moment, as Di Tian's voice reverberated in the Dead Sea, as if he had activated some sort of divine ability, a powerful ray of light suddenly erupted from one of the cultivation planets. That light was purple, and during that instant, it illuminated the entire galaxy for a moment. An indescribably terrifying presence appeared from that purple light, and it was as if the cultivation planet had turned into a gigantic, enchanted treasure. When it shone, a loud bang reverberated in the galaxy. As that loud bang rumbled, the purple light shot out and charged towards a vortex. In an instant, it crashed into its surface, causing the fog's rotation to freeze for a moment. The purple pillar of light instantly shot through the fog and charged straight into its depths with loud rumbling sounds. This sort of might and terrifying presence caused many of the people on the cultivation planets and continents in the galaxy to snap out of their meditative state and look towards the spot where that terrifying presence was coming from. The cultivation planets around Een Death region were clearly not just for show. They were the Immortal's supreme treasures that were stationed to keep a lookout over Een Death region. They only had one duty, to kill all the souls who left Een Death region. However, if Su Ming woke up at that moment and saw this, he would definitely hesitate, because when the ancient bronze sword left, he did not see the existence of this cultivation planet. As for the purple pillar of light that brought with it a destructive presence, it shot through the vortex of fog at an incredible speed and descended in the sky above Di Tian and Su Ming's battlefield. That powerful light was boundless. It did not seem big when seen from the galaxy, but when Di Tian saw it descending from a close distance, he found that it covered an area of several thousands of leagues. Di Tian knew clearly that even if it was a relocation, it would only be a short relocation. If it was a long relocation, then even if it seemed as if it had disappeared, in truth, there would still be traces of its existence. He might not be able to detect or destroy it, but once he used the Immortal's enchanted vessel without hesitation, he would be able to change everything. Destiny die. Di Tian let out a low roar, and his voice was drowned out by the powerful rumbling light that descended from the sky. Right before his eyes, the purple pillar of light shot through the sky with a bang and landed on the Dead Sea. The water within several thousands of leagues instantly vaporized. All the living beings in the sea within those thousands of leagues died at that instant. The seawater dissipated, and the world at the bottom of the sea and the continent that was originally there were also crushed by the pillar of light. It was pierced through. This was the power to destroy the world. The first chapter has been delivered. The distance between us is getting wider and wider. Help me rush back. To be continued. If you like this work, please come Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 659. Thousands of leagues of seawater disappeared, and thousands of leagues of the seabed shattered. A gigantic pit appeared on the Dead Sea. The seawater in the area seemed to have gained intelligence under the impact of the purple light and did not dare to get close to it, causing the pit to remain there for a long time. Tion stood in midair with his hair a mess. He did not say a single word. The bone sun before him had already disappeared, and Su Ming was no longer around. After some time, Tion lifted his head. His expression was ferocious, and anger that could burn the skies appeared on his face. He let out a roar that shook the sky and earth towards the sky. That roar reverberated in the air and spread in all directions, lingering for a long time. His destiny's heavenly punishment had destroyed everything within a circular area of thousands of leagues, but he could not find any trace of Su Ming. He might have sensed that the power of heavenly punishment had taken effect, but Su Ming did not die. He spread his divine sense outwards, and with killing intent and madness, he swept through the world, covering the limits of his divine sense. But he could not find any trace of Su Ming. Su Ming disappeared from Tion's world once again just like that, causing him to be unable to find him. He had sent his clone here, but in the end, this was the result. Destiny's awakening also made Tion's heart tremble. He stood in midair until the seawater beneath him was filled up once again as the purple light disappeared. The entire Dead Sea sank slightly. I refuse to believe that you can hide forever. One of these days, I will find you again, and the next time we meet, I, Tion, swear that I will do everything in my power to make you fall into oblivion. Tion closed his eyes, but the dark look on his face did not disappear. He turned around and took a step towards the sky in the distance. The sky was blue and the sun was bright. It was almost noon, and when it shone on a person's body, it was slightly hot and forced out beads of sweat, but there was not much wind that could take it away. The fragrance of the osmanthus flowers did not dissipate even with this little wind. It could only linger in the area where they grew and bloomed to its heart's content. Sounds of laughter could occasionally be heard not too far away from the osmanthus forest. Through the forest, a group of scattered houses could be seen. There were about 100 of them. At that moment, smoke could be seen rising from their chimneys, and the osmanthus fragrance made this place look like a paradise. There were a lot of mountains around it, causing this place to look very remote. There were not many people around. There were only some faint tracks left by carriages on the road leading to the houses. Perhaps it was because it had just rained not too long ago, but even though the sun was bright, the ground was still muddy. When someone walked on it, they would squelch. In this osmanthus forest, there was a young man wearing patched clothes. He sat on some leaves and leaned against a tree. He stared blankly at the sky, which the leaves couldn't cover. No one knew what he was thinking. His complexion was a little pale, but his pale face appeared very delicate and pretty. He was not very old, only about 12 or 13 years old. His clothes, which were full of patches, were unable to conceal his temperament, which would cause others to have a good impression of him when they saw him. However, his body looked very frail. As he leaned against the osmanthus tree, his eyes looked very lively as he looked at the sky. He silently looked at the sky and held some grass in his hand. As he moved his hands, he gradually weaved the grass into the shape of a little person. All of this seemed to be his subconscious action. He continued to look at the sky, but no one knew what he was looking at. Perhaps it was the blue sky, or perhaps it was the white clouds. Other than himself, no one knew. After a long time, footsteps came from afar. Along with the footsteps was the clear voice of a child. "Big brother dog leftovers, big brother dog leftovers. Our mother is calling you home." It was a girl's voice. Her voice was clear and pure, as if she had not been tainted by the world of mortals. She did not have any thoughts, and she still had the innocent dream of a child. It was a little girl about 8 or 9 years old. She was also wearing patched clothes and had 2 little braids. She was not very pretty, and there was a birthmark on her face. However, Her eyes were bright. If one ignored the birthmark, she would be a very cute girl. When the young man heard the girl's voice, he retracted his gaze from the sky. A smile that came from the bottom of his heart appeared on his face. He sat up from the ground and looked at the little girl who was running towards him from afar. "Slow down. The ground is muddy," the young man said gently as he walked over. There was a doting look in his eyes when he looked at the little girl. "Big brother dog leftovers. Our mother made something delicious today. It's ugly little thing's favorite yam. Hurry up, hurry up," the little girl said with a smile as she ran to the young man's side. She even lifted her little hand and helped him brush off the mud and leaves on the young man's clothes. The young man patted the little girl's head and held her hand with a smile. They walked out of the forest together. "Big brother dog leftovers, why do you always come here? There's nothing here other than the osmanthus tree." The girl called ugly little thing blinked and held the young man's hand as she asked curiously. The young man smiled and did not say anything. He only lifted his head to look at the sky, and an ancient look that no one else could see flashed through his eyes. When they walked out of the forest, the ancient look was buried in the young man's eyes and could no longer be seen. The only thing left was the sigh in his heart. Perhaps it could be felt by the emptiness, causing the sky, which was initially sunny, to become much dimmer in an instant. Dark clouds appeared. The forest was not too far away from the house. It only took them a short while to reach it. The young man was dragged along by the girl, who was clearly in a hurry to eat the yam. Along the way, there were some children who were about their age playing with each other. When they saw the siblings, some of the children teased them. "Ugly little thing, what delicious food did you make at home today?" "That's right, ugly little thing. Didn't you say that your parents would make you a set of clothes without any patches?" The girl holding the young man's hand lowered her head. Her body was slightly stiff, but she soon recovered. Still, she lowered her head and was about to leave this place as soon as possible. Not too far away was a very normal-looking house. That was her home. This could not be considered a tribe, because the people here were not related by blood. Perhaps this place could only be called a village. When the boy heard the children ridiculing the girl, he frowned, but the girl was holding his hand in a death grip. There was also a pleading look on her face, which made the young man sigh in his heart once again. He quietly followed her back to her house. "We're home. Pama, I called Big Brother Dog leftovers back. We can eat now." The girl smiled happily and pushed open the door to the house before running in. Su-ming followed behind her and entered the house. It was a house made of mud. It was not big and only had 2 rooms. When he walked in, coughing sounds came from one of the rooms. "Dog leftovers, did you go to see the osmanthus again? It'll be gone in a few more months. It's good to look at it more." As he spoke, a middle-aged man walked out of the room. The man's face was ancient, and his clothes were simple and unadorned. His expression was simple and honest, and as he walked out, he looked at Meng Hao with a kind smile. He wasn't very tall, nor did he look very muscular. However, there was something very unique about his hands, which were covered with scars that covered almost every part of his body, especially his fingers. At that moment, the boy could tell with just one glance that the scars on the man's hands were clearly new wounds. Walking out with the man was a woman behind him. Her skin was rough, but the original beauty of her face could still be seen. However, time had left far too many marks on her body, causing her to look much older than her original age. At that moment, she held 2 bowls in her hands and looked at the boy with a smile. "You little brat, if you don't let me call you to eat, you won't come back. You only come home when it's dark. Your body is still weak. Don't catch a cold outside." A warm smile appeared on the boy's face. He went up and took the bowls from the woman's hands before speaking softly. "Father, Mother, I'm fine. All right, eat more yam later. Your grandpa Zhang just had a grandchild born this morning, so he asked your father to weave a few grass dolls for him in exchange for some yam. He said that it's for you and ugly little to nourish your bodies." The woman looked at the boy and the young girl who was happily setting up the chairs next to him lovingly, then walked over with the man. It was not a sumptuous lunch. Aside from the softness of the cooked yam and the addition of some fruit juice, it was very sweet. Ugly Little's cheerful laughter echoed in this ordinary family. The woman's love and the middle-aged man's gentleness turned into warmth. The boy looked at them, and a smile appeared on his face as well. That smile came from the bottom of his heart. He was grateful to this family, and he was especially grateful to the girl called Ugly Little. He had woken up in this place a year ago. The girl had gone out into the forest alone to gather different types of grass for her father to weave dolls. She had discovered him in the mountains and carried him back home. From then on, he had lived in this place. He had a younger sister, and her name was Ugly Little Thing. This was because she was ugly, but her kindness, her adorable laughter, and her spirited eyes made him remember that when he was unconscious, there was a weak little body that carried him all the way here. He had a father who was a very honest and simple man. He was a mortal who lived his entire life in poverty and was plagued by illness. Only the grass dolls he weaved were very lifelike, and they were the toys of the children in the village. He had a mother, and she was a very kind and gentle woman. She loved her husband, her daughter, and her family. She also gave him, an outsider, enough motherly love. He was Su Ming. When he woke up in this warm home a year ago, his power had scattered, but it did not disappear. Instead, it had hidden itself in his body. It was a remnant left behind by the injuries he had suffered after his battle against Tian, and he would need time to recover completely. In truth, this sort of chapter is not suitable to be written during the battle for monthly votes. Not only is it tiring, it is also not as satisfying as fighting. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 660. Fortunately, during the battle in the past, before he fainted, he had put away all the items he had brought out, including the small snake and the others. However, the small snake was in deep sleep, and Han Mountain Bell was also put away into his storage bag. Everything was slowly recovering. For some unknown reason, his appearance did not return to that of an adult, but remained that of a teenager. His father had dyed his hair black with grass juice because he was worried that others would not welcome Su Ming's appearance. During the past year, this warmth was something Su Ming could not forget. It had become the warmth in his life. He liked this place, liked his little sister called Ugly Little Thing, liked his father who weaved straw dolls, and liked his gentle mother. But he had more important things to do. He had to search for his master and his senior brothers. He had to make himself stronger. Only by doing so could he run into Tian again and turn this disaster that had been placed on him into Tian's disaster. He could not stay here for too long, because if he stayed here, there was a high possibility that he would bring a disaster of life and death to this family, because Tian might come at any moment. The past year might have been peaceful, but Su Ming could not stay in this warmth for eternity. As he ate the mountain medicine and looked at his little sister, his parents, a thought bloomed in his head more than once. If one day he found his master and senior brothers, and they were still safe, if all the trivial matters disappeared, then he would no longer have to search for a future. As long as this place was still around and he could return, he would stay in this warmth with this ordinary old man and his little sister for the rest of their lives. He would watch her grow up, watch her get married, watch her have children and grandchildren. How good would that be? This was a beautiful life, and a smile appeared on Su Ming's face. Big brother dog leftovers. What are you smiling about? Ugly Little Thing swallowed a huge mouthful of yam and looked at Su Ming as she spoke in her clear voice. Her eyes sparkled, and she looked incredibly beautiful. The name Dog Leftovers was given to Su Ming by this family. At that time, Su Ming had been gravely injured and had been lying on the bed every single day, as if he was about to die at any moment. In the woman's tribe, if a child was not in good health, they would usually give him a nickname. The name was not pleasant to the ears, but it contained the warmth and affection of a family. This was the meaning behind a name being given to the child so that the child would be healthy from then on. Dog's leftovers, something that even dogs aren't willing to eat. I don't think a dead god will come and take it away. I'm thinking, once you grow up and get married, what sort of dowry should I prepare for you? Su Ming said softly as he stroked Ugly Little Thing's hair. You're just a few years older than me. Why do you always sound like an elder? I'm also thinking about what present I should prepare for my future sister-in-law when Big Brother grows up and marries her. Ugly Little Thing scrunched up her nose and spoke in the same tone Su Ming used to speak. Ugly Little Thing's parents looked at the pair of children in front of them. They looked at each other and saw the smiles in each other's eyes, as well as the warmth in their hearts. It was the warmth of a family. No matter how cold the weather was, it wouldn't freeze them. It was a home where dark clouds filled the sky and rain fell, dispelling the heat. It was a home that couldn't break into the house even when the world was covered in rain and cold. At some unknown point in time, rain had fallen on the ground. It was afternoon, and the sky was dark. The falling rain seemed to possess a strange power that made all those who heard it for an extended period of time unable to help themselves but feel sleepy. Ugly Little Thing was like this. Once she was full, she patted her stomach and smiled at her parents and Big Brother. As she spoke, she gradually dozed off, and when she fell into Su Ming's embrace, a sweet smile appeared at the corners of her lips, and she fell asleep. Su Ming looked at his little sister in his arms gently, then picked her up gently and placed her on the small bed in the room. Once he covered her with a blanket, he looked at the sleeping Ugly Little Thing and the distinct birthmark on her face. Su Ming could sense the mockery and isolation this child had gone through as she grew up. But she was very sensible. Even if no one played with her, she would play by herself. Even if she was bullied outside, when she returned home, she would wipe away the tears on her face and put on a smile so that her parents would not miss her. She was very kind. She did not hate any of the companions who mocked her. She liked them, and she would do anything for them. However, she would always choose to avoid all the pain that came her time and time again. Big Brother. Ugly Little Thing mumbled softly in her sleep, and the smile on her face became even more adorable. It was as if she was playing with Su Ming in her dreams. This was the happiest thing in her heart besides her parents. As he looked at Ugly Little Thing, Su Ming patted her body gently. Gradually, when she fell into a deep sleep, he walked out of the room and looked at the rain getting heavier. Occasionally, lightning would slice through the sky, and muffled sounds of thunder could be heard. Ugly Little Thing's father was squatting under the eaves of the house. There were quite a large amount of grass of different sizes and even different colors placed beside him, and he was weaving them while they were soaked in rainwater. Ugly Little Thing's mother was clearing away the food. When she saw Su Ming coming out, she smiled lovingly. "Your little sister is asleep?" Su Ming nodded and helped her clear away the food. "You silly child, there's no need for that. You should go and sleep as well. Judging by the color of the sky, it might rain for the entire night." "It's fine, Mother. I'm not tired." Su Ming smiled and shook his head. The woman looked at Su Ming and sighed softly in her heart. A year ago, when her daughter had carried the boy back, she had been wondering just which parents would be willing to abandon such a beautiful child. During the past year, Su Ming's diligence and the way he looked at them with the desire to snuggle up to them had caused the woman to treat him as her own child. When the rain outside became heavier and almost turned into a large sheet of rain, Ugly Little Thing woke up as if she had been startled awake by thunder. The woman quickly went over to comfort her, patted her, and slowly fell asleep again. Su Ming walked quietly to the middle-aged man's side and sat down. He looked at the rain outside and felt the chill of the rain crashing into his face. After a long while, he turned his head around and looked at his father. His focused expression made him look as if he did not know that Su Ming had arrived. The grass rope in his hands looked as if it had gained a life of its own and continued weaving in his hands, turning into the shape of a doll. The middle-aged man would occasionally put grass of different colors into the doll, causing it to look as if it was alive. However, most of the grass had sharp edges. It would not have been a big deal, but the middle-aged man's focus and actions would cause him to overlook the pain of his palms being cut by the grass. His hands were covered in wounds, and it was clear that they were left behind by the dolls he had made throughout his life. Su Ming watched. At that moment, Ugly Little Thing's father possessed a presence that Su Ming could not understand. He was still immortal, but the dolls he made seemed to have been given life by him. Su Ming had not been watching this for a day. It had been a year, ever since he woke up and became a member of the family, He had fallen in love with watching ugly little things father make the dolls. There seemed to be signs of life on each of the completed dolls, and it made him immerse himself in them, as if he had gained an epiphany. As time passed, his epiphany increased, but there was still a veil covering everything, causing everything to seem as if it was shrouded in fog. What is life? The words on the black wooden block appeared in Su Ming's head. How are your studies going? As Su Ming watched, the sky started to turn dark at some point in time. Usually, it would have been dusk at this time, but now, with the dark clouds and rain, night had arrived early. The middle-aged man finally lifted his head. When he saw Su Ming beside him, a smile appeared on his face, and he put down the grass doll in his hands before he asked a question. Su Ming hesitated for a moment, then brought out the small doll he had made in the osmanthus forest in the morning and handed it to Ugly Little Thing's father. I feel like I'm missing something. Su Ming frowned. It's missing life. Ugly Little Thing's father took the small doll Su Ming had made and smiled kindly. As long as it exists, it will have life, especially plants. They have life, and the dolls made from them also need to have life. I don't quite understand how to express this life. It's just a feeling, I guess. After all, I've been making dolls my entire life. This one of yours doesn't have life, Ugly Little Thing's father explained to Su Ming. How can I make it have life? Su Ming asked softly. Make it with your heart. Imagine how you want to make it. Imagine how it will look like when you make it. I only know how to make 2 dolls in my life, and both of them are in the shape of children. The girl is Ugly Little Thing, and the boy is, Ugly Little Thing's older brother. Ugly Little Thing had an older brother. Su Ming had heard her mention this before. He was older than her by 10 years, and 8 years ago, he was taken in as a disciple by Evil Spirit Sect, which was located not too far away from his place. In the blink of an eye, 3 years had passed, and there was no news of him. Su Ming fell silent. After a long while, he picked up a blade of grass by his side. Just as he was about to make it, a barely noticeable glint suddenly appeared in his eyes. He lifted his head, and there was a chilling look hidden in his eyes. By his side, Ugly Little Thing's father had clearly not noticed it. As he sighed, he continued making the doll, but after a moment, an even colder chill gradually spread out from the rain outside the house. 2 indistinct figures walked towards them slowly from a distance. As they walked over, the rain that fell on their bodies immediately turned into ice and fell. The color of the ice was also black, and if anyone saw it during the day, they would definitely be terrified. Immortals! Su Ming's expression was calm as he watched the 2 people continuously walking towards him in the rain. They were heading straight towards the house where Ugly Little Thing's family was. The connection of the plot and the connection between South Morning and Eastern Wastelands was something that required careful consideration. The third watch was not considered an explosion, but the third watch was used to rest and tidy up the plot. There were definitely very few people who would do this. Today is the third watch. Let me rest my brain and tidy up the subsequent plots. Tomorrow, I will continue with the explosion. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 661. In the last few days of the month, people are very angry. They are anxious, sullen, angry, and many other emotions. They want to be calm, but how can they be calm? The entanglement of the monthly votes is like a knife that keeps stabbing. The frequent outbursts put great pressure on the mind and body. It's not just me. I know there are millions of you who are the same. This kind of pressure exists in the Devil Army. I know you are tired. You are gritting your teeth and holding on. I know. I also know you have sacrificed a lot. For me, for Chio Mo, for justice, for those who have been wronged in your hearts, we must win. I knew that saying that we had to win or something like that was all fucking empty talk, but I wouldn't say anything. I couldn't write a single chapter that would explosively increase the monthly votes. I couldn't write an incomparably emotional speech, and I was even more unwilling to complain about how tired I was. But I can tell you without guilt that I have given my life, my time, to writing. Writing is the first thing I do when I wake up every day. The moment I write, It is at 9, 10 at night. At this time, my wife is asleep, my daughter is asleep, and I'm the only one sitting in front of the computer in a daze. Every time I finish writing, I will be in a daze for a long time. I don't know what I'm thinking. I don't know anything. After I finish writing, I don't know what I want to say next. Erupt, I said, I did, I fought, I roared, I kept pushing myself. I told myself that if I am not tired to death, then don't be a coward. A man should fight with his life on the line. But the monthly votes keep pulling away, and my hard work is reversed time and time again. What should I do? What kind of words should I say in this single chapter to move you who still have your monthly tickets? Go and give them to me. Tell me what I have to do to get my monthly votes. Tell me how to express them. Tell me what to do. And those of you who still have monthly votes, tell me. Real life has made us numb. On the internet, can we who are numb burn our blood? At this crucial moment, in these crucial days, would it be difficult to obtain a few monthly votes? Is it really so difficult? Erupt. I will continue to erupt. I will not relax. Fight, I will fight. Fight to the death. Fight to the death. This death may not be death, but another glory of life. Like the lyrics of Chiyomo's song, scatter the rest of my life song of barbaric death on the basis of this intention. So what if I become a demon? To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 662. The rain shattered the ground and fused into the circles of ripples. Su Ming could not see them clearly, because the living beings on the ground also existed in these ripples. Su Ming looked at the two cold figures walking towards him from the distance. They were getting closer to him in the darkness that had replaced dusk in the past. As they got closer, a wave of freezing air crashed into his face, and as it spread out, it caused the cold rain to become even colder. The lightning in the sky disappeared at that moment, as if it had retreated in the cold and was hiding in the darkness, unwilling to come out. Only the sound of rainwater falling on the ground and the pitter-patter of footsteps gradually became clearer in the rainy night. It gradually traveled into ugly little thing's father's ears, causing the middle-aged man to instinctively lift his head. He saw the two thin figures walking in the rain and arriving before the house, right before Su Ming and himself. You are ugly little things, father shuddered. When he tried to stand up, his body trembled slightly. Su Ming quickly got up and supported him, then looked at the two people coming towards him coldly. He could tell that these two people did not harbor any killing intent when they came here, or else it would have been a piece of cake for these two immortals to destroy this village. Kneel down and listen to my orders. The person on the left had a piercing voice. When he spoke, the temperature in the area instantly dropped once again. Ugly little thing's father was, after all, a mortal. Once he was shocked by that voice, his face immediately turned pale. He suddenly remembered that his eldest son had also been taken away by a person dressed in this manner on a rainy night 8 years ago. At the same time, perhaps it was because this person's voice was so piercing that it caused the temperature in the area to drop. At the same time, his voice also traveled into the house, startling the sleeping ugly little thing and her mother awake from their dreams. A barely noticeable glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. If he was at the peak of his power, he would have been able to kill these two immortals with just one finger. However, his cultivation base was still slowly recovering, and he did not know when he would be able to return to his peak. Yet even so, with 1/10 of his cultivation base recovered, it would still not be difficult for him to kill these two people. Junior Brother Zwa. The person on the right of the two thin men in black spoke in a low voice and cast a glance at his companion on the left, as if he was slightly displeased by what he had said just now. Old man, is Chundashi your eldest son? The black-robed man to the right turned his head around and cast a glance at ugly little thing's father, who was being supported by Su Ming. He also cast Su Ming a sideways glance, but he did not pay any attention to him. As he spoke, he took off the black robe on his head, revealing a pale face that looked to be in his 40s. His appearance was ordinary, but there was a faint blue light in his eyes. Ugly little things, father shuddered. If Su Ming had not been supporting him, he might have already fallen to the ground due to the cold, but when he heard Qindashi's name, he seemed to have gained strength in an instant. Yes, Sheer is my eldest son. Ugly Little Thing's father's voice trembled. He did not know what had happened, but he felt an indescribable pain from the other party's tone. Chinda, she is dead. The person who answered Ugly Little Thing's father was the person on the left with the shrill voice. At the instant those words fell into Ugly Little Thing's father's ears, the middle-aged man was stunned. It was as if a wave of life force had disappeared from his body, causing him to look as if he had aged a lot in an instant. 2 streams of tears fell from his eyes and fell into the ripples on the ground, no longer visible. At that moment, the sound of someone falling came from the house. Ugly Little Thing's mother had heard those words when she walked out of her room and fainted. Ugly Little Thing stood by the side and stared at the 2 thin men in black outside the house with a dumbfounded expression. The voice from before was still echoing in her ears. That frail body of hers looked as if it had lost its soul at that moment. As her face turned pale, it was as if her entire being had turned pale. Old man, Junior Brother Chun has outstanding potential and was doted upon by the sect Elder Zhao. He even took him in as his disciple, but a few days ago, Junior Brother Chin died in an accident. The 2 of us came here on sect Elder Zhao's orders and on account of Junior Brother Chin's past friendship, the black-robed man to the right said in a low voice. Once he finished speaking, he brought out a bag from his bosom and placed it under the eaves of the house. These are the things Junior Brother Chun has accumulated over the years. We cultivators have no use for them, but to you mortals, they can make your lives better. The words of the person to the right might have been calm, but there was a sentimental look on his face. When he looked towards Ugly Little Thing's family, pity flashed briefly in his eyes. As for the person to the left, he remained aloof. Thank you, grand immortals. This is She Heir's life. Ugly Little Thing's father cried and was about to kneel down to the 2 cultivators, but the person to the right waved his arm and helped him up. Su Ming watched everything that had happened. Not a single hint of it could be seen on his face, but he knew clearly in his heart that it was rare for a sect to send someone to inform the family of a disciple's death. This sort of thing was practically impossible unless there was something special about the person who had died. As Su Ming supported Ugly Little Thing's father, he turned his head around and cast a glance at Ugly Little Thing, who was standing there with a dumbfounded expression, as well as her unconscious mother by her side. The family's previous warmth had crumbled under this terrible news. This is your other son, right? And this lass. The person to the right of the 2 men in black cast his gaze on Su Ming once again. His gaze was like lightning, and once he cast him a glance, he looked towards Ugly Little Thing. They don't have a detailed understanding of Ugly Little Thing's family. Looks like they didn't ask around, and Ugly Little Thing's older brother didn't tell anyone either, Su Ming thought in his heart. By sect Elder Zhao's orders, he will allow your family to produce another son, and he will personally take him in as his disciple to inherit Junior Brother Chin's regrets after his death. Congratulations, old man. We will give you 7 days to choose the person who will join Evil Spirit Sect. 7 days later, when we return from our trip, we will take him with us, the person to the right said languidly. Once he finished speaking, he no longer bothered with Ugly Little Thing's family and turned around to leave. The other fellow sect member by his side gave Su Ming and Ugly Little Thing a profound smile before he left as well. The rain became heavier. The 2 people in black walked in the curtain of rain, their bodies becoming indistinct before they gradually disappeared. Only Su Ming could see the 2 people turning into 2 long arcs that flew into the sky. Su Ming had seen the evil spirit sect they spoke of during the past year. It was a mountain in the east that was surrounded by clouds and fog. Only when the sky was clear would it be possible to see its existence faintly. However, these 2 evil spirit sect disciples were flying towards the west, a clear sign that they were not returning to the sect. Based on their previous words and Su Ming's analysis, he was certain that these 2 people had left the sect for something important. They had only come here to fulfill sect Elder Zhao's request. That was why they gave them 7 days instead of immediately choosing someone to take the child with them. Clearly, if they brought a child with them, it would affect their other mission. It would be better for them to just do as they said and take the child with them when they returned. To these two people, this was a simple message, but to Ugly Little Thing's family, this was a bolt out of the blue. It was a grievous news that they could not refuse. It was especially so when they had just gone through the pain of losing their son, and now another child was about to be taken away. This sort of thing was a disaster to this honest and kind family. Ugly Little Thing's father no longer made dolls. He had indeed become old, and with grief in his heart, he went to his wife and cried quietly. Ugly Little Thing's mother also gradually woke up at that moment. She looked at her husband with a dumbfounded expression and started crying. Su Ming stood by the side, quietly, with a complicated look on his face. He could sense the family's grief and their helplessness towards fate. Ugly Little Thing did not cry. She bit her bottom lip and lowered her head. We can't let Ugly Little Thing go with them. She's still a child, Ugly Little Thing's mother looked at the quiet, Ugly Little Thing who seemed to not know how to cry, and her heart clenched in pain, as if it was being cut by a knife. However, she cannot fight back. 7 days. We'll hurry through the night and leave this place. Ugly Little Thing's father gritted his teeth and looked at his wife and daughter before speaking resolutely. It's useless, Daddy. I've heard people say that immortals are gods. No matter how far we hide, it will be very easy for them to find us if they want to. At that time, if we anger the immortals, our entire family will be punished. I'll go. I'll join this immortal sect. Ugly Little Thing murmured softly. She seemed to have grown up a lot in an instant. If I can survive, if I can become like the immortals one day, then I'll find the reason behind my brother's death. Ugly Little Thing clenched her fists and closed her eyes. I'll go. In the midst of the family's grief, Su Ming cast his gaze towards the rain outside the house. The pouring rain also sounded as if it was crying. His voice traveled into the family's ears, causing Ugly Little Thing to open her eyes. Ugly Little Thing's mother was momentarily stunned. When she looked towards Su Ming, conflict and uncertainty appeared on her face. This has nothing to do with you. Child, you should leave as well. Leave this place. Ugly Little Thing's father immediately said. Su Ming looked at Ugly Little Thing, then at her father and mother, and a smile appeared on his face. He took a few steps back, lifted his robes, and knelt down before the two old men. I have no way of repaying you for saving my life and letting you stay here. You've raised me for a year, and the warmth of the family is something I've rarely experienced in my life. Daddy, Mommy, Ugly Little Thing is still young. I'll go. I didn't have parents since I was young. I only had my elder who raised me, but now he's no longer around. You made me feel warmth. Ugly Little Thing, once I leave, you have to be sensible and take good care of your parents. Don't worry, I'll come back to see you. Big Brother Dog leftovers, Ugly Little Thing opened her mouth, but she did not know what to say. She looked at Su Ming, and eventually, tears fell down from the corners of her eyes. Daddy, Mommy, it's settled. I'll go. Su Ming looked at the couple before him and etched their faces deep into his heart. A year was not long, but to Su Ming, it was a warmth he had never experienced before. It was different from a ninth summit, and it was also different from Dark Mountain. First, please widen the distance between us. There were only 3 days left until the end of the month. Could he widen the distance between us by 1,000 votes? To be continued. If you like this work, please come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 663. It continued raining for 3 days. The 3 days of rain washed the land and caused the osmanthus flowers to fall, causing the land to be damp and all the houses to be filled with dampness. Even the blankets they used to sleep in at night were filled with dampness. This was how the season was like. During these 3 days, few people ventured too far out of their houses besides the hunting grounds. Only occasionally when the rain stopped would some children run out barefooted and play in the mud while laughing happily. Ugly Little Thing would always pester Su Ming at this time and pick up some mud not too far away from the house to make some small animals that he could not tell what they were. Every single time this happened, Su Ming would play with her with a smile on his face. As he looked at this kind and adorable child, he remembered his own childhood. Yet during these 3 days, Ugly Little Thing's family was filled with grief and silence. Su Ming's request had caused the family to struggle with great difficulty. They did not know how to choose. This was also why Su Ming felt warmth towards his family. If it was any other family, then this would not have been a problem where they would not even need to choose. After all, was it difficult to choose between a child they picked up and their own daughter? Ugly Little Thing's father was silent, and so was his wife. Their gazes constantly moved between Su Ming and Ugly Little Thing. They looked at the birthmark on her face and her frail body, and their hearts ached for her. However, when their gazes fell on Su Ming, that pale face, frail body, that understanding gaze, and that expression that said he treated them as his parents made the couple's hearts ache once again. There were 4 more days before they would have to make their choice. Dad, you once said that you have to give life to dolls when you make them, but just what sort of thoughts do you need to give life to dolls? Su Ming looked at Ugly Little Thing's father and asked softly. This was the 4th day since the people from Evil Spirit Sect left. Su Ming placed the straw rope before Ugly Little Thing's father and lowered his head to weave it. People need to be moved. Only when their hearts are moved can they make dolls with life. Ugly Little Thing's father said gently as he looked at Su Ming. Ugly Little Thing's father looked at Su Ming and spoke gently. However, the complicated look in his eyes could not be hidden away when Su Ming looked at him. In the past, the dolls your father made didn't have any life. It was when your older brother, Sure, was born that I listened to his cries and created the first living doll outside. This was the first time Ugly Little Thing's father had called himself Daddy in front of Su Ming. His words were spoken very naturally, and there was not a hint of him putting on an act or putting on an act. When he said those words, he picked up a straw rope. He first tied a knot, then more knots appeared on the grass rope in his hands. When there were a dozen-something knots on the grass rope, he looked towards Su Ming. Before I married your mother, I was a tribesman of a tribe called the Gutta tribe. The Gutta tribe is a small tribe with only a few hundred people, but it has a long history. I didn't have the physique to train in the berserker way since I was young, so I could only be immortal. But my father, your grandfather, was the sure hung of that tribe. A smile appeared on Ugly Little Thing's father's face, and a look of reminiscence appeared on his face. You know as well that those who could not practice the berserker way were only required to do one job, and that was to use the different methods of each tribe to record the history of their tribe. The legacy of Valley Tribe is ancient, and no one knows exactly when it started. However, based on the method of recording in the tribe, we can tell that this is not fake, because this method of recording is based on grass knots. We use different types of grass and different knots to record history. Outsiders will not be able to understand its meaning, and only those who have mastered this method will be able to read it. I was that generation's sure hung, but the disaster of the tribe, the separation of my people, and their deaths caused all of this to cease to exist. I met your mother, came here, and stayed here. I'm just a mortal, and I don't have any other skills. It's very difficult for me to survive here. But I know how to make grass knots, and with an endless amount of grass knots, I can weave them into dolls. Ugly Little Thing's father looked at Su Ming. As he spoke, his hands did not stop moving. He continued weaving, and when he finished speaking, a small doll appeared in his hands. That small doll's appearance was incredibly similar to Su Ming's. This small doll is made of 29 grass knots. I've recorded 29 blessings for you in these grass knots. It's the same doll. I gave your brother one when he was born, and it was the same for your little sister when she was born. Now, I'll give this to you. Ugly Little Thing's father handed the doll in his hands to Su Ming. Grass knot record. This was the first time Su Ming had heard of this method of recording history. It did not matter whether it was in the Alliance of the Western Region or the Land of South Morning. None of the tribes he saw had a recorder like this, much less someone called Sure Hung. However, he could imagine that this Sure Hung should have a position in a tribe similar to the head of the guards and the chief of war. Once Su Ming took the doll, the instant his hand touched it, a sharp glint appeared in his eyes. He could clearly feel that there was a wave of life force contained within the doll. That life force was very faint, and if his divine sense had not recovered slightly, it would have been difficult for him to detect it. That life force contained blessings, and there was also a wave of warmth that spread through Su Ming's entire body. Su Ming lifted his head and cast a deep glance at Ugly Little Thing's father. If it was not because he was absolutely certain that this man was not a person with any cultivation base, and that he was just a very normal mortal, then once Su Ming saw this doll, he would definitely think that it was made by someone with cultivation base. That ancient face with wrinkles on it was filled with the trials of life. That waist that would always bend unnaturally when he stood up seemed to have been weighed down by helplessness and fate throughout the years. However, it was precisely this sort of mortal, a normal person who had made a doll with his hands that contained this sort of power of life. Su Ming might have seen quite a number of dolls from Ugly Little Thing's father, but the life contained within each of them was incredibly weak and not enough to shock him. However, the one in his hand, then had caused the dissipating power within Su Ming's body to show signs of ripples. This is related to the grass, not records. But the most important thing is, since he can reach the pinnacle of his will, he can reach the pinnacle of his hands. He used his hands to give the thought of grass knots, causing this thought to turn into a blessing in his ignorance. This blessing contained his prayers. That is why as long as he is not dead, then this blessing will exist forever. Su Ming seemed to have come to an epiphany. It was the same logic as when he drew, and it was the same as when a person wrote something, and when others saw it, they would feel as if there was a powerful army charging at them. This was the result of someone reaching the pinnacle of something. It had nothing to do with their level of cultivation, and neither did it have anything to do with anything else. It was only connected to their hearts. The grass knots you make don't possess life because you don't know how to make grass knots to record things. How about this? I'll teach you. Your big brother couldn't learn it in the past, and your little sister wasn't interested in it either. I'm very pleased that you like it. Ugly Little Thing's father smiled kindly and picked up a grass rope. Once he handed it to Su Ming, he picked up another one himself. Grass knot records is a very ancient method. I don't know all about it, and I can only record some simple things. Each knot is different, and every single time you tie one, you have to think about what you want to record in your heart. I remember when my Abba told me. He told me like this: it doesn't matter whether it's grass knots or rope knots. You need to use your eyes to see them, your hands to touch them, and your heart to feel them. The most important thing in this is to touch them. Touch the feeling you get when you tie each knot. It's very mysterious, and I can't describe it clearly, but before there were any words, our ancestors used this method to record everything in their lives. As Ugly Little Thing's father spoke, he tied 8 knots. Time passed by just like that, and in the blink of an eye, several days went by. During them, Su Ming was immersed in this grass knot record and continued learning from his father. However, Ugly Little Thing's father was clearly not a good educator. Most of the time, he only felt that he could not express his feelings clearly with words. During the first 2 days since Evil Spirit Sect arrived, Ugly Little Thing's father spent most of his time in silence. Occasionally, he would look at Su Ming with a complicated gaze, and most of the time, he would look at him with a complicated gaze. It was the same for Ugly Little Thing's mother. The rain outside had stopped for a few days, and once noon arrived, it started pouring once again. The sound of rain continued echoing in the air, even when it was late at night. Su Ming lay in the small house that belonged to him and looked at the rain outside the window, along with the occasional lightning bolts and rumbling sounds. He could not fall asleep. He held a grass rope with 8 knots in it. His father had given it to him before he went to bed. Over the past few days, Su Ming's understanding of this grass knot record was still rather vague, and he could not remember it clearly. At that moment, as he touched the knots on the grass rope, Su Ming thought about his past. Ugly Little Thing was in the same room as him. To this family that was not very rich, it was very difficult for each child to have their own room. That rhythmic breathing had accompanied Su Ming for a year, and it was an unforgettable memory for him. He turned his head around and looked at Ugly Little Thing. As he looked at the sleeping girl, a smile appeared on his face. However, the tears falling from the corners of the girl's eyes as she slept and her murmurs in her sleep made Su Ming's smile turn into one of doting love. Big brother dog, leftovers. Don't go, Ugly Little Thing can do it. I'll hit them, Daddy, Mommy. We'll be together forever. In her world, her biological older brother was a blur. After all, she had just been born 8 years ago. When she grew up, she only knew that one of her older brothers had joined an immortal sect. Aside from that, everything else was blank. Su Ming's appearance had gradually caused his figure to be imprinted in that blank space. To her, her older brother was Su Ming. Her greatest wish in this life was for her family, including her big brother dog leftovers, to stay together happily. Su Ming wiped away the tears at the corners of Ugly Little Thing's eyes, and a resolute look appeared in his eyes. He did not want to see sorrow in this family. He wanted this family to always be happy. Ugly Little Thing, I promise you, I will protect your family until the end. He had already pulled away from the other party by 500 votes. How would he pull away any further? He continued writing. This was the second chapter. To be continued. If you like this work, please come come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 664. Time passed by quickly, and this was the last day of Evil Spirit Sect's 7 days. On this night, perhaps the people from Evil Spirit Sect would come and take away either Su Ming or Ugly Little Thing and send them back to Evil Spirit Sect, to where Sect Elder Zhao was. The rain stopped when morning arrived. Su Ming sat down on some leaves that had been wiped away from the water stains in the osmanthus forest he had come to often over the past year, and looked at the sky. The sky was clear. There were no clouds in it, and it was completely different compared to the day before. Even though it was morning, the sun was still very gentle. When it fell on his body, it seemed to be able to chase away the humidity that had accumulated over the past few days and give him a warm feeling. However, most of the osmanthus flowers in the forest had turned into decorations in the mud, causing the mud to also possess the fragrance of flowers. When those who smelled it fused with the fragrance of the mud after the rain, they would feel a different kind of emotion. Su Ming continued looking at the sky, just like that. No one knew what he was looking at. He did not know what he was looking at either. His eyes were looking at the sky, but his heart had fallen silent. He quietly circulated the energy in his dried-up body, causing the recovered tenth of his cultivation base to slowly circulate through his body. The recovery of his cultivation base was much more difficult than he had imagined. The injuries he had sustained in the past were simply too severe, and his appearance had also remained the same as Destiny's. He had analyzed this matter several times and combined it with the fact that Tion had never been able to find him. Perhaps it was precisely because of his current condition that Tion could not find him. As for why he was like this, and why he had been able to escape from Tion's great disaster, Su Ming only remembered that he had turned into a Sun Song before he fell unconscious. He could already imagine that the person who had saved him was the old Sunmaker. Berserker Soul Realm. Once my cultivation base recovers, the most important thing for me will be the Berserker Soul Realm. Su Ming mumbled. He held a piece of grass rope in his hand and was tying knots one after another, eventually turning them into a doll. Grass knot records, Meng Hao thought. Even with Daddy's mortal psyche, he was able to condense the power of blessing. If someone with a cultivation base were to do this, the power would be even greater. Grass knot records. This should be a special kind of spell. It should have something to do with curses. This was the first thing that appeared in Su Ming's mind when he heard Ugly Little Thing's father say that they were going to draw up a settlement. If a person's curse was condensed into a grass knot, then combined with many cursed people and weave them into a grass doll, would it be possible to launch a different kind of curse? Among the soul catchers, there are spells that use human hair to carry out curses, but most of them are legends. Even if they really exist, their power isn't that great, and it's negligible against powerhouses. But if it's combined with the grass, not art. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. He lowered his head and looked at the grass, not in his hands, remaining silent. The morning passed by just like that. When noon arrived, the sun was hot, and it shone on Su Ming's body through the forest. Footsteps could be heard coming from outside the forest. Su Ming averted his gaze from the sky and looked over. It was ugly little thing. She walked over quietly and stood before Su Ming. "Big brother dog leftovers, you can't go," she said softly, looking at Su Ming. "You will die if you go. This is our family's matter. I must go." Ugly little thing bit her lower lip, her voice filled with determination. "Come, sit beside me." Su Ming smiled and made some space beside him. The leaves were clean, and he looked at ugly little thing. The girl scrunched up her nose and sat down beside Su Ming. Once she opened her mouth, as if she wanted to say something, Su Ming smiled and looked at her. "If I'll die if I go, then won't it be the same if you go? That's different. I'm smarter than you. I might not die if I go. Big brother dog leftovers, listen to me for once, okay? Let's not talk about this. Sit with me for a while." Su Ming patted ugly little thing's head and leaned against the tree behind him. He looked at the sky and no longer spoke. Ugly little thing hesitated for a moment, then also leaned against the tree and looked at the sky. The sky was so blue that it made people feel as if they were flying and swimming in it. "Big brother dog leftovers, just how big is the sky?" "Very big." "Then just how big is the sky?" "Very high." You're lying." "Then let me ask you, big brother dog leftovers, what do you think is behind the sky?" Su Ming remained silent for a moment, then looked at the blue sky and asked softly, "Behind the sky is a vortex of fog." "What's behind a vortex of fog?" Ugly little thing's curiosity was piqued. She blinked and asked, "Behind a vortex is a galaxy. There are plenty of planets there, as well as plenty of floating continents." Su Ming mumbled. He had seen this with his own eyes. "What's that place?" It was clear that this was the first time ugly little thing had heard of this. She was, after all, a child, and had forgotten her goal in coming to this place. Instead, Su Ming's words made her even more curious. A freezing glare shone in Su Ming's eyes as he said languidly, "That's another world." "Another world? Are they the same as us?" With ugly little thing's age, she was still confused by Su Ming's words. She frowned. "I want to know as well. That's why there will come a day when I want to see just what the world over there is like and just how different it is from ours." Su Ming said calmly. The determination on his face was something that ugly little thing could not understand at that moment. Perhaps she would remember this scene, and many years later, she would understand it. The sky gradually became less bright. As dusk arrived, the sky turned crimson, causing the ground to look as if it was dyed in a layer of light. Only at this moment did ugly little thing remember her goal. She immediately stood up and looked at Su Ming. "Big brother dog leftovers, I'm officially telling you that you can't go. This is my business. I'm the one who will be taken away tonight. You have to remember to help me take care of my parents." Ugly little thing forced down her fear towards the future and spoke to Su Ming. "Do you really want to go? If your big brother doesn't die." Su Ming stood up and looked at ugly little thing before he spoke softly. There was a strange rhythm to his voice, and when it fell into ugly little thing's ears, a dazed look gradually appeared on her face. I don't want to go. I want to stay by my parents' side for the rest of my life. I don't want you to go either. I want our family to be together forever." Su Ming patted ugly little thing's head lovingly, then held her hand and walked out of the forest. When they walked out of the forest, ugly little thing's expression returned to normal. She was momentarily stunned, then immediately broke free from Su Ming's hand and took a few steps back before placing her hands on her hips. "Big brother dog leftovers, I might be usually so gentle, but when I'm angry, I'm very powerful. You can't go." Ugly little thing puffed up her cheeks. She looked just like an adult, and when Su Ming saw her, he laughed. All right, I won't go, all right? Really?" When ugly little thing heard this, she immediately asked. "Really?" Su Ming said with a smile. When ugly little thing heard Su Ming's words, she felt at ease and went up to hold his hand. Then, she skipped towards her home. However, the fear and dread towards the future on her face was something she could not hide at her age. The happiness she put on was something she had learned since she was young, and at that moment, she naturally showed it. There was no rain on that night. During dinner, Ugly Little Thing's happy laughter echoed in the air. However, there was a slight quiver in that laughter. Ugly Little Thing's father was silent, and there was grief on his face. As for Ugly Little Thing's mother, when she turned her head around, she would wipe away her tears. Dog leftovers, eat more, come. Ugly Little Thing's mother added some more food for Su Ming. She looked at him, and there was a complicated look on her face. There was a bowl of food that she and her husband had never eaten, and Ugly Little Thing had also avoided eating it. Only Su Ming ate it that night. He could not taste the taste of the food, but he could tell that the leaf was a type of herb that could calm the nerves and make a person drowsy. If he ate too much of it, he would fall asleep without knowing it. Su Ming sighed in his heart. There was no way he would not understand what this family was thinking. In the end, they had decided not to let him go through an unknown battle of life and death in their place. Instead, they wanted him to sleep peacefully, and when the sun rose, Ugly Little Thing would disappear. Perhaps the couple had argued and struggled with this decision, but in the end, they still chose to do it. Even if their hearts would ache and they would regret it, at that moment, this was their decision. When the final dinner ended, Su Ming stood up and bowed deeply towards Ugly Little Thing's family. This action of his did not garner any sort of response, because at that moment, Ugly Little Thing had already closed her eyes and fallen asleep. Her parents were the same. Su Ming might have only recovered 1/10 of his cultivation base, but it was still enough to make this family fall asleep without their knowledge so that he would not be affected by the effects of the herb. He supported his parents and returned to their room. Once he covered them with blankets, Su Ming looked at the white-haired couple with a gentle expression on his face. He lifted his right hand and slowly tapped each of their foreheads, sending out what little life force he had left so that the couple's bodies would slowly recover in the future, and they would no longer be plagued by illnesses. With Ugly Little Thing in his arms, Su Ming placed her gently in her room. As he looked at the sleeping child before him, the image of her carrying him on her back as they descended the mountain echoed in his ears once again. After a long, long time, Su Ming placed his right hand on the birthmark on Ugly Little Thing's face. After a moment, when he lifted his right hand, the birthmark on the girl's face had become much fainter. Once he covered her with a blanket, Su Ming walked out of the room and put away the dishes from dinner. Once he washed them with water, he rolled up his sleeves and tidied up every single spot in the house. As he looked at the place he had become familiar with over the past year, a reluctant look appeared on his face. This was the 3rd chapter. He had to continue writing. Fight, fight, fight. He had to widen the distance between them. To be continued. If you like this work, please come Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 665. Pama, in my heart, you are my father and mother. I'm leaving now. Ugly Little Thing, little sister, you must be happy. Su Ming stared at them blankly, and warm memories rose in his head. This was a kind family, and every single one of them was the same. It did not matter whether it was when Su Ming came or after he left. This family, which was not a normal rich family, had given Su Ming a warmth he would never forget. Su Ming stood there for a long time as he looked at everything before he turned around and sat down under the eaves to wait for the person who would come that night. Night approached. There was no rain that night, and the light from the bright moon shone on the ground, causing the night to no longer be considered dark. It also made the moon seem as if it had an extra layer of separation. It was quiet all around. Only the occasional snoring from Ugly Little Thing's parents could be heard. And when it fell into Su Ming's ears, he found that it was also filled with warmth. Su Ming closed his eyes. After a long while, when he opened them, 2 long arcs charged towards him from the darkness before him. After a moment, they descended before him and turned into the 2 men in black who had come to this place 7 days ago. Their faces were slightly pale, and once they appeared, Their gazes fell on Su Ming. He did not speak. When he looked at the two people coldly, one of them suddenly lifted his foot and moved past Su Ming. Su Ming did not stop him, but a hint of killing intent that these two people could not detect appeared in his eyes. If they dared to do anything to this family, then even if Su Ming had only recovered a tenth of his cultivation base, he would still attack. Even if he had to lose his cultivation base once more, he would still kill these two people on the spot. Fortunately, the evil spirit's sect disciple who stepped into the house did not do anything out of line. Once he walked past all the rooms, he saw the herbs leaves in the kitchen. When he walked out with a slightly strange expression, he turned his head around and cast a glance at Su Ming before whispering a few words into the other person's ear. Not bad. You're so young, but you're already so daring. What's your name? The evil spirit's sect disciple who had not been cold towards Ugly Little Thing's family 7 days ago cast a few scrutinizing glances at Su Ming before he spoke languidly. Chen Su, Su Ming answered calmly. Chen Su, close your eyes. We'll bring you back to the sect. These two people clearly had something on their minds, and they did not speak much. The person who spoke swung his arm, and a gust of wind immediately swept up Su Ming. The three of them turned into two long arcs that charged into the sky. Their arrival and departure did not attract anyone's attention. Ugly Little Thing's family was still asleep and did not know that their calamity had already dissipated. Su Ming was held under the evil spirit's sect disciple's armpit as he stood in the sky. He looked at the ground beneath him, getting further and further away, at the place where he had lived for a year, slowly disappearing from his sight, at the family who had given him warmth, and at them disappearing into his memories. He closed his eyes. He couldn't see the land, the family, or smell the sweet osmanthus, evil spirit sect. At the instant Su Ming closed his eyes, a freezing glare shone in them. This was the eastern part of Eastern Wastelands, and it was the place occupied by evil sect. Tian had sent 2 clones to this place. One of them was to bring order to Su Ming, and the other was to keep watch over the gains Great Leaf Immortal sect had obtained over the years in Eastern Wastelands. Yet at the end of the day, he was wary of the strongest immortal in evil sect, who came from the eastern part of Eastern Wastelands. Even among the immortals, he was still considered a powerful warrior, Jian, and he was the strongest clone of his real self. Evil sect was the name given to the 4 great sects in the eastern part of Eastern Wastelands. These 4 great sects were Evil Dust Sect, Evil Spirit Sect, Evil Lust Sect, and Evil Immortal Sect. These 4 great sects were led by Evil Immortal, and the other 3 sects served as support. When Evil Immortal Ji An's clone descended in the past, he swept through the land and became the strongest force in the eastern part of Eastern Wastelands. He also uprooted the Berserker tribes in the eastern part of Eastern Wastelands, causing an innumerable number of tribes to crumble. The Berserkers were gradually assimilated by Evil Sect as time passed by, and they turned into Evil Sect disciples. For puffs of black smoke rose into the sky from the eastern part of Eastern Wastelands. These 4 puffs of black smoke came from the 4 great sects, and the black smoke from Evil Immortal Sect was incredibly thick. It filled the sky above the 9 heavens, and it was a terrifying sight to behold. The black smoke from the other 3 sects was slightly weaker, but it was still enough to intimidate the entire area. This black smoke was a sign that there were powerful immortals in those sections. Only those who had attained great completion in the Berserker Soul realm, or the immortals who had reached ascendance, would be able to give birth to the smoke of powerful immortals once their presence fused within Death region. At that moment, not too far away from the village where Ugly Little Thing and her family were, there was a mountain that towered into the clouds. That mountain was shrouded in clouds and fog, making it indistinct. Only when the sky was completely clear would it be visible from a distance. A black smoke that covered an area of several tens of thousands of feet connected the top of the mountain to the sky. As it tumbled about, an incredibly mighty pressure spread out from it, causing all those who saw it to feel their hearts tremble. Strangely shaped rocks stood tall on the mountain, and in the midst of the ferocious air, black water flowed down the mountain like a spring. A ghastly, cold, and resentful presence spread out from the mountain. This was the location of Evil Spirit Sect, one of the 4 great evil sects. There were many different colored sails on the mountain, and shrill cries would occasionally come from those sails. Those cries were filled with endless pain and resentment, and when they traveled out, they would not disappear even after a long time had passed. The Pure Black Hall was one of the many buildings on the mountain. They were scattered all over the place, as if the mountain was divided into 3 layers. Only the outline of the hall on the highest layer could be seen, and most of it was hidden in the black smoke. The center of the mountain was the largest. Most of the black palaces seemed to be hanging in the air, and there were dried skeletons hanging from them. There were also quite a number of ferocious birds lingering around the area, occasionally flying down to peck at the flesh. Numerous long arcs moved in and out of the sky, showing off the ghastly atmosphere of the place. At that moment, 2 long arcs approached the mountain side by side, and one of them had Su Ming under his armpit. Su Ming looked at the ghastly mountain and the large amount of corpses hanging from the palaces. The ghastly and malicious aura from the mountain came crashing into his face. "Boy, this is Evil Spirit Sect. You're pretty lucky. You don't need to go through 9 days of punishment. Neither do you need to carry the mountain for 99 days, much less soak in evil water. You can become an Evil Spirit Sect disciple straight away. If you rise to power in the future, don't forget about us. But let me give you a word of warning. Don't easily get into fights with others in Evil Spirit Sect. This place encourages internal strife among the sect disciples. The number of deaths each disciple has committed will surpass your imagination." The other person beside Su Ming said in a cold and ghastly voice. Su Ming's expression remained as calm as ever, but no matter how calm he still looked pale to the others, because his skin had always been sickly pale to begin with. Evil Spirit Sect. A ghastly smile appeared at the corners of Su Ming's lips without the other 2 people noticing it. With the number of deaths he had committed, perhaps there were not many people here who could compare to him. He did not know whether his arrival was a blessing for Evil Spirit Sect or a curse. The 4th chapter has been updated, and it has exploded with 11,000 words. I hope I can get a few more monthly votes. Tomorrow, I'll continue exploding. To be continued. If you like this work, please come Achidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 666. The area beyond Evil Spirit Sect was filled with resentment, causing it to be slightly better when seen from afar. However, if anyone looked closer, they would only see a blur. It was as if there were ghosts wailing and wolves howling, echoing in the air, and those piercing sounds were enough to make the hearts of all those who came to this place for the first time tremble. The 2 people who had brought Su Ming back had also been like this before they entered the sect. As they flew, they believed that Su Ming's pale face was due to his fear towards this place, and they did not suspect the silent Su Ming at all. As the 2 people charged forward, they circled around the mountain of Evil Spirit Sect a few times before charging down to the foot of the mountain. Once they landed, they stepped outside a mountain gate. That gigantic gate was also black, and there was a ghastly air about it. At the same time, it looked as if there were countless vengeful souls surrounding it, and they would pounce on all those who wanted to walk past it. The expression of the person who brought Su Ming remained as calm as ever. He was completely unbothered by those vengeful souls, and with Su Ming under his arm, he took a few steps forward. Once he stepped past the mountain gate, a staircase leading straight to the top of the mountain appeared before the trio. There were numerous black statues standing on both sides of the staircase. Each of them looked incredibly ferocious, and at the same time a ghastly, chilling air spread out from them. They were also the spots where vengeful souls gathered. If you walk down this path of no return, then you will be stepping into Evil Spirit Sect. Boy, do you hear the shrill roars coming from this place? The person holding Su Ming cast him a glance and said with a fake smile, "If I let go of you and let you go up on your own, Then before you can even take a few steps, you will be dragged by those vengeful souls and become one of them. The other evil spirit sect disciple said coldly. When the other evil spirit sect disciple spoke coldly, he suddenly lifted his right hand, formed a seal, and swung his arm forward. With it, the staircase instantly became different. It might seem the same, but there was now an innumerable amount of people. There were men and women, old and young, and all of them were either dressed in rags or were covered in blood. They were struggling and howling on the path, and quite a number of them were staring at Su Ming and the other two with ferocious expressions on their faces, as if they would pounce on them at any moment. Furthermore, there were countless vengeful souls on either side of the staircase, all of them reaching out with outstretched hands to grab the three of them and drag them over. Welcome to Evil Spirit Sect. Here, you will know what hell is and what terror is. The two Evil Spirit Sect disciples who had brought Su Ming to this place smiled at each other and took a huge step forward with Su Ming between their arms as they walked up the stairs. As they walked, the resentful souls around them swiftly avoided them, as if they were incredibly afraid of these two people. They did not dare to get any closer. In fact, some of the vengeful souls let out soundless screams when the Evil Spirit Sect disciple, with Su Ming in his arms, closed in on them because they did not manage to dodge in time. They would rather have their bodies shatter with a bang than touch him. There was no need to even mention the vengeful souls who had stretched their hands out from the sides of the stairs. As the three of them approached, they seemed to have seen something terrifying, and all of them retreated. Senior Brother Zhang, there's something off about these vengeful souls. Last time, when I returned to the sect, they weren't like this. The one who had brought Su Ming to Evil Spirit Sect frowned and said in a low voice, "That's right. Usually when they see someone, it doesn't matter whether they're from Evil Spirit Sect or not. They'll pounce on them. I only remember that they would avoid us in fear when the progenitors of the sect went out. But now, the man named Zhang who had Su Ming in his arms was also incredibly puzzled. The two of them could not figure it out no matter how much they thought about it. As they hesitated, they moved forward even faster and brought Su Ming to the middle section of the mountain. Su Ming remained silent all along the way. He looked at the mountain, at the many black halls on it, and the people hanging from them. In fact, some of the long arcs that would occasionally fly past in the sky would also flash before his eyes. Why can berserkers practice immortal cultivation? This was the question in Su Ming's heart towards the existence of Evil Spirit Sect. Before long, Su Ming saw a man who was about 10 feet tall, not too far away from the stairs leading up to the mountain. He was bare-chested and had a gigantic wicker basket on his back. He was walking down the mountain, and every few steps he took, he would lift his hand into the wicker basket and bring out some minced meat. There were wisps of black smoke on those minced meat, and when they fell to the ground, the vengeful souls would immediately pounce on them, as if they were trying to devour them. The man's expression was incredibly ferocious, and there were several scars on his face, which made him look terrifying. When Su Ming and the other two saw him, he also saw Zhang and Zhua, and he grinned. With it, the scars on his face started distorting, as if there were 4 to 5 mouths on his face laughing ferociously at the same time. He looked incredibly terrifying. Even Zhang and Zhua clearly found it hard to get used to that smile. They quickly moved to the side and made way for him. "Greetings, Senior Brother Sean." The two of them wrapped their fists in their palms respectfully. When the man approached them, Su Ming saw his eyes. They were a pair of eyes with a red glare within them. If anyone looked into his eyes for an extended period of time, they would feel incredibly uncomfortable. "Why did you bring an outsider to the sect?" When the man walked over, he brought out a large amount of minced meat from the wicker basket and scattered it by the side, attracting the vengeful souls to pounce on it and devour it regardless of the cost. "Senior Brother Sean, this person is a member of the Chun family that sect elder Zhao asked us to bring back when we went down the mountain. He's Junior Brother Chun, she's younger brother." The man named Zhang who held Su Ming in his arms immediately said. "Chundashi." The man cast a sideways glance at Su Ming, and a strange look appeared on his face. As he grinned, He brought out a piece of minced meat from the wicker basket with his right hand and handed it to Su Ming. I see. So it's Junior Brother Chun. I don't have a gift for you, but this piece of soul meat is yours. When Zhang and Zhua saw this, envy immediately appeared on their faces. A thought appeared in Su Ming's heart. He took the piece of minced meat and wrapped his fist in his palm to bow towards the man. Thank you, Senior Brother Sean. You don't have to thank me. No matter which vengeful soul you feed this piece of soul meat to, that vengeful soul will do something for you. Only inner sect disciples can have this. Outsiders can't get their hands on it, so you must treasure it. If you can survive for 7 days here, then you can thank me. The man let out a ghastly laugh and no longer bothered himself with Zhang and Zhua. He walked down the mountain. When he left into the distance, the man named Zhang's gaze fell on the minced meat in Su Ming's hands. The eyes of the man, named Zhua by his side, also sparkled. Su Ming naturally saw their expressions, and he laughed coldly in his heart. Not only were the people in evil spirit sects sinister, they also did not shy away from internal strife. He had just arrived here today, and he had already seen this scheme with his own eyes. The man named Sean had clearly given him this piece of minced meat because he had heard of Chun Dashi's name. Judging by his expression, he seemed to have some sort of grudge against Chun Dashi. This might seem like a gift, but in truth, if Su Ming truly had no power and was just a 12 or 13-year-old boy, then based on the looks on Zhang and Zhua's faces, he might have ended up creating a disaster for himself. Chun Dashi, ugly little things, big brother. Just what happened to you in evil spirit sect that made that sect elder Zhao want your family to come here? And this man named Sean, who is in the initial stage of the Berserker Soul realm, to scheme against me. Su Ming shook his head in his heart. Without waiting for Zhang and Zhua to say anything, he handed the minced meat in his hand to the man named Zhang, who was holding on to him. Senior Brother Zhang, I don't have much use for this, so please accept it. The man named Zhang smiled profoundly and took it away without hesitation. Once he did so, he cast a glance at the man named Zhua by his side, and the fierce look that had appeared in their eyes disappeared. When they looked at Su Ming, there was a hint of praise in their eyes. Junior Brother Chun, you're young, but you know how to make choices. Not bad. The man named was said coldly. Senior brothers, who was that Senior Brother Sean just now? Su Ming immediately asked. He's an inner sect disciple, and we're from the outer sect. It's different. Remember this, outer sect disciples are not allowed to fight amongst themselves. But if you run into an inner sect disciple, you must be careful because it's fine for an inner sect disciple to kill you. But if you injure an inner sect disciple, then there'll be a problem. The man named Zhang seemed to have given Su Ming a reminder for the sake of that piece of flesh. But with your current condition, it'll be good enough if you don't get bullied. It's not like you'll provoke an inner sect disciple either. As the two of them charged up the mountain stairs, Su Ming saw a few more evil spirit sect disciples walking past them. These people were ghastly and silent, and when they walked past them, Su Ming only saw Zhang and Zhua continuously bowing to them. From this alone, it could be seen that these two people did not have high statuses. It could also be seen that this sect elder Zhao was also an ordinary person in evil spirit sect. After a moment, Zhang and Zhua brought Su Ming away from the middle section of the mountain stairs. They walked down a small path that extended from the side, and in the distance, they could see a gigantic mountain gate. This is where the outer sect of evil spirit sect is located. If you go further up, you'll find the inner sect. As for the place at the bottom, that's where the livestock are kept and where the laborers are kept. Once we walk past the mountain gate, we'll bring you to sect Elder Zhao. As for your arrangements, that's not something we can know. But since you gave us that piece of flesh, I'll give you a word of advice. All the berserkers who practice immortality in evil spirit sect must soak in the evil lake to change the circulation of their blood and activate the immortal veins in their bodies. Only 1 out of 10 people who step into the evil lake will survive. The man named Zhang smiled ghastly and no longer spoke. In his opinion, it was absolutely impossible for this person called Chun Su to live for more than 3 to 5 days. Especially when he recalled Chun Dashi's strange death, coupled with the rumors about Elder Zhao and the sect, He was certain that Chen Su was dead for sure. Before long, they got closer to the mountain gate. When the three of them arrived beside it, Su Ming immediately saw a gigantic python coiled around the mountain gate. That python hissed and stared at the three of them with a cold gaze, as if it could swing its tail at any moment and devour the three of them in one gulp. The python was probably several thousands of feet long, and even though it was coiled around the mountain gate, its remaining tail was still dragged far into the distance. First chapter, to be continued. If you like this work, please come Achidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 667. That python was also entirely black, the same color as the mountain gate. If it did not move, it would be very easy to mistake it as an ornament. At that moment, it was staring at Su Ming and the other two people coldly. A murderous presence came crashing into their faces, and Su Ming could clearly sense that the expressions of the two evil spirit sect members beside him immediately became respectful. I, Zhang Run, greet the sacred beast of the mountain gate. I, Zhuaxing Sun, greet the sacred beast of the mountain gate. The two people quickly wrapped their fists in their palms and bowed towards the black python on the mountain gate. Su Ming was also released from under Zhang Ren's armpit at that moment, and he did not bother himself with him. The gigantic python hissed, and once it swept its gaze past Zhang Ren and Zhuaxing Sun, its gaze fell on Su Ming. Su Ming also looked at the python. He might not have recovered his power, but he could still sense that the pressure brought by the python was incredibly faint. Based on his judgment, this python was only a ferocious beast that was equivalent to those in the later stage of the Berserker Soul Realm. This sort of ferocious beast might be incredibly rare, but to Su Ming, if he recovered his power, he could crush it with just one finger. Almost the instant the python looked towards Su Ming, the snake suddenly moved, and with a speed that made Zhang Ming and Zhu Ming's eyes blur, it stretched its body out of the mountain gate. Its gigantic head appeared 5 feet away from Su Ming, and when it stuck out its forked tongue, it looked as if it was about to touch Su Ming. This sudden scene stunned Zhang Run and Zhuaxing Sun momentarily. Their expressions immediately changed, and they took a few steps back, not daring to stop the python. In their eyes, even Sect Elder Zhao would be very polite when he saw the mountain guarding python. They might be handing the boy over to Sect Elder Zhao, but there was simply no need for them to offend this sacred python that was said to be incredibly vengeful. Su Ming stood where he was and did not move back. His expression was as calm as ever, but a fierce glare shone in his eyes. As he looked at the python staring at him, he spoke languidly. "Get lost." The moment he said those words, Zhuaxing Sun and Zhang Ren immediately widened their eyes. They had brought quite a number of people to Evil Spirit Sect, but almost all of them had been filled with respect when they saw this python. None of them had dared to be so disrespectful as to tell the python to get lost. It was especially so when they felt that there was a clear difference between the current Su Ming and the one before. It was as if he had become another person. What made them even more in disbelief and stunned was that once Su Ming said that word, the python shrank back a little on its own. The frequency at which it hissed increased, and its eyes sparkled. Gradually, it moved further back, and eventually, under Zhua and Zhang's dumbfounded gazes, the python returned to the mountain gate. Su Ming's expression was calm. Ferocious beasts that possessed this level of cultivation all had unique intelligence. Perhaps the words Su Ming said would sound normal to other people, but to the python, it was a murderous aura that made its heart tremble. This murderous aura made it clearly feel that this seemingly weak person in front of it was not simple. Therefore, it slowly retreated. In the midst of Zhang and Zhua's stunned expressions, Su Ming lifted his foot and walked towards the mountain gate. When he arrived beside Zhua and Zhang, he stopped and spoke flatly. "Let's go." Zhua and Zhang's expressions, as they looked at Su Ming, immediately turned strange. They took a few brisk steps forward and left the mountain gate. Once they stepped into Evil Spirit Sect's outer sect, they still could not remain calm. The scene just now still lingered in their minds. When they looked at Su Ming, their gazes were also filled with surprise and bewilderment. Their attitude towards him was also much better than before. On the way, Zhang and Zhuo's hearts were filled with surprise and bewilderment. In silence, they would occasionally look at Su Ming, and when they reached the outer sex grounds in the middle section of Evil Spirit Sex Mountain, they went around some dark halls and found themselves in a rather secluded courtyard. The courtyard was built against a mountain rock, and there were 3 black houses there. It was incredibly quiet, and there was an oppressive air surrounding the place. There were 2 statues erected at the entrance of the courtyard. These 2 statues were about the same as the statues on the stairs leading up the mountain. There were also vengeful spirits around them, causing the courtyard to look even more ghastly. It was especially so since the area right above the courtyard was the place where the smoke from Evil Spirit Sex Mountain was spreading out. Because of that, the sunlight in this place was always dim, and it was never bright, causing this place to give off an even more gloomy feeling. Zhang and Zhuo stopped outside the courtyard and wrapped their fists in their palms before bowing deeply towards the courtyard. "Greetings, Sect Elder Zhao. I am your disciple, Zhang Run." "Greetings, Sect Elder Zhao. The son of the Chen family has arrived. This person is junior brother Chen's younger brother, Chen Su." Zhang and Zhuo bowed respectfully, not daring to lift their heads. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes. He, too, lowered his head and wrapped his fist in his palm before bowing. He was not too worried about his own safety. Unless he ran into a powerful enemy like Di Tian, then he could even fight against those who had attained great completion in the Berserker Soul realm once he recovered. He might have only recovered 1/10 of his cultivation base, but during the past year, Su Ming had been observing his body and found that all his Berserker bones were still there. However, they were incredibly dull, as if they had been stained with dust. Yet even so, his body was still as sturdy as before. It would not be easy for anyone to harm his life. More importantly, his divine sense had recovered slightly. He could open his storage bag. The small snake might have been asleep for the past year and showed no signs of waking up, and it was the same for the Crimson Dragon, but he could still use Han Mountain Bell. Han Mountain Bell might be damaged, but when it was activated, its might was still not to be underestimated. As for the bald crane, Su Ming had not seen it since he woke up. That crane must have been cowardly and fled during the chaos. Su Ming might be able to protect himself with his enchanted treasures and the strength of his physical body, but if he could avoid fighting, he would not want to do so. After all, the most important thing for him right now was to recover his cultivation base as soon as possible. I might not know what Sect Elder Zhao's goal is, but he won't immediately attack and harm the son of the Chun family he believes to be, or else he wouldn't have asked someone to bring me into so much trouble. He only needs to go down the mountain once, and he'll be able to deal with all of this. With Su Ming's experience, once he went through all these things in his mind, he understood most of it. At that moment, a hoarse voice came from the courtyard. That voice was incredibly ghastly, and when it traveled outwards, the freezing air in the area instantly became much thicker. Even the vengeful souls shuddered. "Leave him here. You can go back." Zhang and Zhuo quickly obeyed respectfully and left quickly. When they were far away from the courtyard, the 2 of them wiped off the cold sweat on their faces and turned their heads around to look behind them, then looked at each other. Life and death are decreed by fate. Riches and honor are decided by the heavens. This isn't something we can do. After all, we're just following orders. Zhang Ren shook his head. "That's right. This has nothing to do with us. If Sect Elder Zhao died, it's also because of him, Senior Brother Zhang. Do you think that Chun? Is he really a hidden senior?" The man named Zhuo was convinced, but after a moment of hesitation, he spoke in a low voice. "Quiet. This has nothing to do with us." The man named Zhang immediately let out a low shout, looking incredibly nervous. Once he dragged the man named Zhuo a few steps further away, he spoke in a low voice. "That's most likely the case. Didn't you see that even the sacred python was wary? When have you ever seen that old man being so good-tempered before? This isn't something we can get involved in. Let's keep it to ourselves and not tell anyone, or else we might end up offending someone." It's a good thing that outsiders don't know about this. But there are quite a number of people who saw it on the way, especially senior brother Sean. That's right, you also took his soul and flesh. We'll have to be on the same page about this. You're fine, right? Come, let's talk at my place. When a man named Zhang heard the words soul and flesh, he immediately put on a long face. Once he looked around, he dragged a man named Zhua and left quickly. As for Su Ming, he stood outside the courtyard. At that moment, he lifted his head and sized up the courtyard. It was not too big, and there was black smoke rising from the ground. It turned into ferocious shadows in midair, and once they dissipated, they scattered on the ground. This process repeated itself, causing all those who saw it to be shocked by this bizarre sight. When Su Ming cast his gaze towards the courtyard, the door to the courtyard opened on its own without a single sound. Su Ming did not make a sound. After waiting for a moment, he slowly walked through the open door. At the instant he stepped into the courtyard, the door behind him immediately closed shut on its own. You're quite brave. You're about the same as your big brother in the past. This is the potential I need for my disciple. When the door to the courtyard closed, a hoarse voice echoed in the courtyard. I am Zhao Chong. I had 3 disciples, but they're all dead now. Your big brother is my 3rd disciple, and he's also the disciple I'm most satisfied with. Before he died, I promised him that I would give his belongings to your family, and I also begged me to take one of his siblings as my disciple. From now on, you'll be my 4th disciple. You have the constitution of a berserker, so you're not suited to practice my evil spirit arts. 1 year later, I will arrange for you to step into the evil lake and wash away your berserker body. From then on, you'll be able to practice evil sect's divine abilities. But during this year, if you don't want to die in the evil lake, then you must take evil's resentment pills every day. This pill will allow your body to absorb resentment, and from there, you'll be able to build your foundation for the future. When the hoarse voice finished speaking, a gourd flew out from the house in the middle of the 3 houses. That gourd was entirely black, and at the same time, thick black smoke spread out from it. There was also the face of a ghost surrounding it. A mortal would not be able to see it, but Su Ming could see it clearly. The gourd flew to Su Ming and landed on the ground. The house to the right is your residence. Go. Once the hoarse voice said those words, it did not appear again. Su Ming picked up the gourd without batting an eyelid and walked towards the house to the right. Did he use Chunda Shi to refine pills? Su Ming pushed open the door to the house and cast a glance at the house in the middle from the corner of his eyes. His divine sense had not recovered much, or else he would have liked to see just how this sect elder Zhao looked like. 2nd chapter, to be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.